My husband planted a military-grade encrypted hard drive in my suitcase to frame me for a $20 million corporate theft, so I slipped it into his secretary's luggage instead. At the JFK security checkpoint, he lost his mind on the spot. My name is Nicole. I am 34 years old, and my family thought I was just a quiet cybersecurity director they could use as a convenient scapegoat. They had absolutely no idea I tracked their every single move. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a family who underestimated your worth and tried to destroy your life. The fluorescent lights of the JFK International Airport Terminal 4 security checkpoint buzzed with an irritating hum that matched the mounting tension in my chest. The line moved at a glacial pace, filled with exhausted travelers removing their shoes and unpacking their laptops. I stood patiently with my posture perfectly composed, watching the conveyor belt carry our gray plastic bins into the gaping mouth of the X-ray scanner. Just ahead of me stood my husband, Jason. He wore his tailored Italian suit, running a nervous hand through his perfectly styled hair. Standing entirely too close to him was Amber, his 26-year-old secretary. She wore a tight designer outfit that left little to the imagination and tapped her manicured acrylic nails impatiently against her thigh. We were supposedly heading to a corporate retreat in London, a trip Jason insisted Amber needed to attend to handle his meeting schedules. The reality, which I had known for months, was that they were planning a romantic getaway funded by stolen corporate crypto keys. Suddenly, the security scanner alarm blared a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the dull roar of the terminal. The conveyor belt jerked to a halt. A stern-looking TSA agent, a burly man with a thick mustache, stepped out from behind the monitor. He pulled a sleek metallic silver bin to the side inspection table. Inside that bin sat Amber's expensive leather tote bag. The agent unzipped the bag and began sifting through the contents with gloved hands. He pulled out a large, heavy, limited edition perfume bottle. The bottle was opaque, painted a deep metallic crimson red, and looked unusually bulky for a cosmetic item. "Excuse me, miss," the TSA agent said, his voice carrying the heavy weight of federal authority. "Does this belong to you?" Amber rolled her eyes dramatically, scoffing loudly enough for the people in the next line to hear. "That is definitely not mine," she declared, tossing her blonde hair over her shoulder. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger directly at me. "It must belong to my boss's wife over there. She is always incredibly disorganized and leaves her junk everywhere. She probably tossed it in my bag by mistake because she cannot keep track of her own things." Jason immediately stepped forward, placing his body protectively in front of Amber as if I were a physical threat. He glared at me, his face twisting into a mask of contrived disappointment and anger. "Nicole, how many times do I have to tell you to pack your own bags properly?" he scolded, his voice echoing in the cavernous terminal. "You are constantly embarrassing me in public. You need to take responsibility for your own mess and stop inconveniencing my staff." I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. I simply reached up and calmly removed my dark sunglasses, folding them and sliding them into my breast pocket. I looked at the bottle, then at Amber, and finally met Jason's furious gaze. "That is very strange," I said. My voice smooth, steady, and chillingly quiet. "I only wear Tom Ford fragrances. I have never owned that particular brand in my entire life. If you look closely at the bottom of that crimson bottle, you will see the initials AL engraved right into the metal. Amber Lynn." Amber's smug expression faltered, a flash of genuine panic crossing her heavily contoured face. I took a slow step forward, addressing the TSA agent who was now inspecting the bottle with increased scrutiny. "Furthermore, officer," I continued, projecting my voice, so every single traveler nearby could hear perfectly. "I am a cybersecurity director. In my professional opinion, you might want to look at the base of that bottle. Ask yourself why a simple luxury perfume container has a hidden high-speed USB port carefully concealed beneath a sliding metal panel." The color completely drained from Jason's face. He stepped toward me, grabbing my upper arm with a painful grip, his breath hot against my ear. "Stop it right now," he hissed, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. "You are embarrassing me just like you did when you selfishly refused to pay off my credit card debt when we were 25. Keep your mouth shut, or I swear I will make you regret this." I yanked my arm out of his grasp, stepping back and looking at him with absolute disgust. "I am not paying for your mistakes anymore, Jason, neither financial nor criminal." The TSA agent had already twisted the bottom of the bottle. With a sharp click, the base popped open, revealing not a glass reservoir of perfume, but a military-grade solid-state encrypted hard drive. The agent's eyes widened. He immediately stepped back and spoke rapidly into his shoulder radio. Within seconds, the atmosphere in the checkpoint changed drastically. 4 heavily armed airport security officers and 2 federal agents descended upon our lane. "Step away from the table," a federal agent barked. Before Amber could even utter a word of protest, an officer grabbed her arms, spun her around, and slammed her face first onto the cold metal hood of the TSA inspection table. The sound of metal handcuffs ratcheting securely around her wrists echoed sharply. Amber began to scream, thrashing against the officers, crying out that she was being framed, that she was just an innocent victim. Jason lunged forward to intervene, but 2 officers immediately intercepted him, throwing him against the wall and patting him down. "I am a corporate executive," Jason yelled, his voice cracking with panic. "You cannot do this to me. My wife planted that. She is a crazy, jealous woman." The federal agent ignored his protests, reading them their rights, as the surrounding passengers watched in stunned silence. The $20 million in stolen corporate crypto keys secured on that hidden drive had just become their one-way ticket to federal prison. As they hauled a sobbing Amber and a cursing Jason away toward the detention rooms, my cell phone began to vibrate violently in my pocket. I pulled it out and looked at the glowing screen. It was my mother, Patricia. I swiped to answer, and before I could even say hello, her shrill, frantic voice exploded through the speaker. "Nicole!" She screamed, her tone hysterical. "I just got an alert from Jason's lawyer." "What have you done?" "You fix this mess immediately. You go to the police and tell them you made a mistake. If you do not get him out of this right now, I will disinherit you and erase you from this family forever." I ended the call, slipping the phone back into my pocket. The real war was just beginning. The drive back from the airport was surprisingly peaceful, a stark contrast to the storm I knew was brewing at my house. When I finally pulled my car into the driveway of my sprawling suburban estate, I noticed 4 extra vehicles parked along the curb. My family had wasted absolutely no time. I unlocked the heavy oak front door and stepped into the foyer, slipping off my coat. I walked into the expansive living room, where the afternoon sun filtered through the large bay windows, illuminating the ambush they had so carefully orchestrated. Sitting on my custom Italian leather sofa were my parents, Patricia and Richard. Beside them sat my younger sister, Felicity, who had always been their undeniable golden child. Standing by the marble fireplace, arms crossed in a posture of supreme arrogance, was my African-American brother-in-law, Terrence. Terrence was 35 years old, a highly paid corporate lawyer who made a living out of intimidating people, and he had always relished any opportunity to put me down. The moment I entered the room, the silence shattered. Felicity stood up, her perfectly curled hair bouncing as she crossed her arms and looked me up and down with utter contempt. "You have really outdone yourself this time, Nicole," she sneered, her voice dripping with venom. "You have always been so bitterly jealous of my perfect marriage and Jason's rapid corporate success. Just because you sit alone in a dark, depressing room typing useless computer code all day does not give you the right to destroy the lives of successful people. You are actively trying to ruin this family because you are miserable." I walked calmly to the center of the room, completely ignoring her childish outburst. My mother, Patricia, stood up next, her face red with indignant rage. "You ungrateful wretch," she spat. "Jason is a provider. He is an executive. And you tried to frame him. Do you have any idea the kind of scandal this will bring to our social circle?" Terrence stepped away from the fireplace, adjusting his expensive silk tie. He walked over to the glass coffee table and slammed a thick, stapled legal document down onto the surface. The loud smack echoed in the tense room. "Sit down and listen to me very carefully," Nicole, Terrence ordered, using the deep, commanding tone he usually reserved for bullying opposing counsel in a courtroom. "Jason is my client, and I am representing him in this matter. I have drafted a comprehensive legal confession for you. You are going to sign this document right now. In it, you will confess that you have been suffering from severe clinical depression, extreme paranoia, and mental instability. You will admit that you planted that encrypted drive into Amber's luggage in a fit of hysterical, unfounded jealousy. I stared at the document, then looked up at Terrence's smug, self-satisfied face. You want me to take the fall for a $20 million federal corporate theft? I asked, keeping my tone mild and curious. Terrence laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. I do not want you to. I am telling you that you will. If you do not sign that confession immediately, I will personally ensure that Jason divorces you by the end of the week. I will drag you through the courts, I will ruin your professional reputation, and I will leave you absolutely penniless on the street. You will not have a single dime to your name when I am finished with you. Richard. My father leaned forward on the sofa, pointing a threatening finger at me. You heard him, Nicole. You will do as you are told. I forced you to pay me rent the second you turned 18 to teach you a harsh lesson about the real world, while I gladly bought Felicity a brand new luxury car, because she actually respected this family. You have always been a stubborn disappointment, but today you will obey us. I looked around the room at these people who shared my blood, but possessed none of my loyalty. Terrence stood there waiting for me to break down and cry, expecting me to be the invisible, compliant sister he had ignored at his and Felicity's lavish, over-the-top wedding. Instead, I reached into my large tote bag and pulled out a sleek, blue folder. I opened it and casually dropped a certified property deed directly on top of Terrence's ridiculous drafted confession. Leave me penniless on the street, I asked, allowing a genuine smile to finally spread across my face. That is a fascinating threat, Terrence. Tell me whose street exactly are you referring to? Because you all seem to be under the illusion that Jason purchased this estate. I tapped the heavy parchment paper of the deed. I bought this entire property paid in cash through a limited liability company that I own 100%. Jason's entire yearly salary does not even cover the annual property taxes and landscaping fees for this house. Felicity gasped, her eyes darting to the deed. Patricia and Richard looked at each other in sudden terrified confusion. Terrence, however, quickly recovered his composure. He let out a loud patronizing chuckle and shook his head. You really think you are so incredibly smart, do you not? Nicole? Terrence said, stepping closer to try and physically intimidate me. You think hiding behind an LLC protects you. You are forgetting one massive, crucial detail. Every single asset you own, every business venture, and every property is legally bound by the absolute family trust. Your parents are the sole executors of that trust. They control your LLC. You own nothing without their explicit permission. My parents instantly perked up, their previous panic morphing into greedy, triumphant smiles. They genuinely believed they still held the ultimate leash around my neck. I looked down at the confession document sitting on the glass table. I calmly reached into my pocket and pulled out a heavy silver lighter. With a swift motion, I ignited the flame, picked up the corner of Terrence's legal confession, and set the paper on fire. I dropped the burning document onto the glass coffee table, watching the flames consume their desperate threats as the smoke curled toward the high ceiling. Oh, the absolute family trust, I whispered softly as the paper turned to black ash. We need to have a very serious conversation about that. The fragile silence in my living room shatters the moment the last glowing ember of the confession document fades into black ash on my glass coffee table. Terrence stares at the charred remains, his jaw clenched tightly. He brushes an invisible speck of soot from his tailored navy suit jacket and takes a threatening step toward me. You think burning a piece of paper changes your reality? Nicole, Terrence says, his voice vibrating with rage. You are standing in Jason's house. He is the man who provides for you. He pays this mortgage. I will make one phone call to the local precinct and have the police drag you out of Jason's house before sunset. You will be sitting on the curb with nothing. My mother. Patricia leaps up from the leather sofa. You have always been an ungrateful, spiteful girl, she screams, pointing a manicured finger at my face. Jason gave you a beautiful life of absolute luxury and you throw it back in his face because you are paranoid. You are trying to ruin Felicity and Terrence's reputation by dragging us into your miserable delusions. Terrence lets out a harsh, mocking laugh, pacing the length of my living room. You have always been completely invisible to the real world, Nicole. He sneers, looking me up and down. Do you remember my wedding to Felicity 5 years ago? We had 500 influential guests celebrating at the most exclusive venue in the city. You sat at the very back of the reception hall near the kitchen doors with the catering staff. You could not even afford a proper designer gown to stand beside your own sister as a bridesmaid. You were the odd one out then, and you are the odd one out now. Jason is the only reason anyone in our social circle knows your name. You are absolutely nothing without him. I stand perfectly still, letting his arrogant monologue echo against the high vaulted ceilings of my beautiful home. I reach into my structured leather tote bag and pull out a thick manila folder. I step forward and drop it directly onto the glass coffee table, right next to the ashes of his destroyed confession. Jason's house. I ask, my voice dangerously calm. I tap my fingernail against the folder. Open it, Terrence. Since you pride yourself on being a brilliant corporate lawyer, reading a simple property deed should not be too difficult for you. Felicity scoffs, rolling her eyes, but Terrence hesitates. He snatches the folder off the table and flips it open. He reads the first page quickly, then stops. He blinks rapidly, reading the lines again. The smug, arrogant smirk slowly melts off his face, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated confusion. His hands actually tremble slightly as he grips the legal document. What is this? Terrence stammers. This cannot be right. I take a slow, deliberate step closer, forcing him to look me in the eye. That is the certified deed to this estate, Terrence. I bought this property 3 years ago, paid in full through a limited liability company, an LLC that I own 100%. Jason does not own a single brick, a single blade of grass, or a single piece of furniture in this building. Jason's entire yearly salary does not even cover the annual property taxes and the seasonal landscaping fees for this house. He is a guest in my home. And as of 5 o'clock this morning, when he tried to use me as a blind mule for his corporate espionage, he became an evicted guest. Richard, my father, stands up from the sofa, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. That is completely impossible, he shouts. Jason makes an absolute fortune. He runs an entire tech division. You just sit in the dark and type on a computer. You do not make real money. I turn my icy gaze to my father. I am a director of cybersecurity for a global financial institution. I design digital fortresses that protect billions of dollars in assets. My annual bonus alone triples Jason's entire yearly compensation. I let him pretend to be the breadwinner because his fragile ego demanded it, and because keeping my wealth private kept greedy people like you from knocking on my door, asking for handouts. Make no mistake, this house is mine. My money bought it, and my name is the only one that matters here. Nobody is kicking me out of anywhere. I am the one doing the evicting. Felicity stares at me, her jaw practically hitting the floor. The golden child who spent her entire life believing she was the wealthy, successful sister suddenly realizes she is standing in a house she could never afford in her entire life. Patricia sinks back down onto the sofa, clutching her chest, unable to process the reality that her scapegoat daughter is the most powerful person in the room. But Terrence is a cornered animal, and cornered animals always bite back. He forcefully slams the deed back onto the glass table. He straightens his posture, desperate to regain control of the room. He lets out a loud, booming laugh that sounds entirely forced. You really think you are untouchable, do you not, Nicole? Terrence says, stepping forward to block my path. You think buying a house through a shell company makes you a genius? You think hiding behind an LLC protects your assets from us? You are forgetting one massive, crucial detail about how this family operates. Terrence points a finger directly at my chest, his eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. Every single asset you own, every business venture, every bank account, and every piece of property is legally bound by the absolute family trust. Your parents are the sole executors of that trust. They control your LLC. They control your finances. You own absolutely nothing without their explicit legal permission. Richard steps forward, puffing his chest with that aggressive posture he uses to intimidate corporate board members. He pauses to adjust his silver cufflinks, looking down his nose at me, as if I am still the teenager he bullied. "You do not get it, Nicole," he says, his voice echoing across my living room. "Grandmother Margaret was a visionary, but knew you were financially incompetent. She structured the Absolute Family Trust to protect our generational wealth from erratic people like you. The bylaws state that as your parents and executors, we have fiduciary control over any entity you create, if we deem you incapable. And right now, framing your successful husband and putting him in custody proves you are entirely incapable." I watch him parade around my living room, acting as if he owns the floorboards. Richard continues, pointing a stiff finger at the deed resting on the table. "You will sign this property over to Felicity immediately. Jason will need a mountain of cash for his defense attorneys, and we are not letting him go down for your meltdown. We will liquidate this estate by the end of the month to cover his bail and legal team." I look at my father, marveling at his audacity. "You want me to give my home to Felicity to pay the legal fees of the man who tried to send me to federal prison?" I ask, tilting my head as I study his expression. Richard does not blink, displaying his lack of empathy. "It is for the good of the family," he insists, crossing his arms. "You always needed to learn how the real world works. Do you remember when you turned 18? I forced you to pay market rent to live in your childhood bedroom. I did that to teach you a lesson about responsibility, while you were juggling 2 minimum wage jobs and crying about your college tuition." In the exact same week, I reply, my voice dropping an octave. "So the anger simmers just beneath the surface. You bought Felicity a brand new Mercedes convertible because she managed to get a C average." Felicity scoffs from the sofa, tossing her highlighted hair over her shoulder. "I deserved that car because I respected our parents, Nicole. You were just a stubborn, ungrateful brat who refused to listen. Now sign the house over before Terrence makes good on his threat and ruins you permanently." I do not respond right away. I turn my back on them and walk over to the crystal pitcher sitting on the side console. I pour myself a glass of iced water, listening to the liquid splash gently against the glass. The silence in the room grows incredibly heavy, thick with their expectation of my usual compliance. I take a slow, deliberate sip, letting the cool water calm the adrenaline rushing through my veins. I am not the frightened girl they remember. I am the architect of their downfall. "You all put so much faith in the Absolute Family Trust," I say, turning back around to face them with absolute composure. "You wield it like a weapon whenever you want to force me into a corner. You talk about grandmother's vision and your fiduciary control as if you are untouchable royalty ruling over a kingdom that can never be breached." I set the glass down on the marble coaster. "But you forgot one very important detail about what I do for a living. I am a cybersecurity director for one of the largest financial institutions on the Eastern Seaboard. My entire career is built on finding critical vulnerabilities in complex secure systems. So last night, after I found Jason packing a stolen $20 million hard drive into my luggage, I decided to do a little digging of my own into our family finances." Terrence crosses his arms, rolling his eyes in exaggerated disbelief. "You cannot hack a legally binding trust document, you idiot," he sneers. "I did not hack a document, Terrence," I reply, my tone razor-sharp and commanding. "I audited the financial infrastructure of the trust itself. I tracked the routing numbers, the wire transfers, the offshore accounts, and the massive unregulated withdrawals that have been bleeding it dry for the past 36 months. I look directly at my father, whose face is suddenly losing its aggressive flush, turning a sickly shade of gray. "I audited that trust last night. It is completely bankrupt." The room goes dead silent. The kind of silence that rings in your ears and makes the air feel entirely too thin to breathe. Patricia shoots up from the leather sofa, her face pale and her hands trembling uncontrollably. "That is a lie," she screams, her voice pitching into a hysterical, frantic frequency. "That is an absolute vicious lie. The trust has tens of millions of dollars in it. We have massive investment portfolios. We have prime real estate holdings across the state. You are just making up garbage to try and scare us because you know we have you cornered and you have no way out. I hold my mother's panicked gaze for a long moment, letting her desperation fill the space between us. I slowly reach back into my structured leather tote bag and pull out a thick stack of printed financial documents clipped securely together with a heavy binder clip. I walk back to the glass coffee table where the ashes of Terrence's fake confession still sit, and I toss the heavy stack of papers right next to them. The documents slide across the smooth glass, stopping right in front of Patricia. These are the verified statements from your supposedly secure Swiss bank accounts. I state, my voice echoing with absolute finality. I bypassed your dummy corporations and traced the actual liquidity. The portfolios are empty. The real estate holdings were all leveraged and lost. You do not have tens of millions of dollars right now, Patricia. You have a negative balance of $4 million. The silence stretches so tight it feels like the glass coffee table might shatter under the pressure. Patricia stares at the bold red numbers printed on the top sheet of the financial summary. Her manicured hands hover over the paper as if touching it might burn her skin. Richard stumbles backward, hitting the edge of the leather sofa and dropping down heavily onto the cushions. $4 million in debt, he whispers, his voice hollow and completely drained of its usual arrogance. $4 million? Where did it all go? He looks up at Terrence and Felicity, his eyes wide with a sudden, terrifying realization. Terrence steps in front of the table, attempting to block the documents from Richard's view. "This is fabricated nonsense, Richard," he barks, sweating visibly under the stiff collar of his expensive suit. "Nicole forged these documents to distract us from her own criminal behavior. She is a computer hacker, for crying out loud. She printed these out in her basement to create a distraction." I laugh, a cold, sharp sound that cuts effortlessly through Terrence's pathetic defense. "I did not forge the signature of the lead auditor at your private wealth management firm, Terrence," I say, pacing slowly around the perimeter of the seating area. "And I certainly did not fabricate the official wire transfer logs detailing exactly where the trust money went." I stop right behind Felicity, who is sitting stiffly on the edge of her seat, staring straight ahead at nothing. I lean down slightly, pitching my voice so every syllable rings clear. "Tell your father, Felicity. Tell him about the VIP offshore gambling syndicates. Tell him about the massive six-figure baccarat losses that started 3 years ago and spiraled into an unmanageable addiction." Felicity flinches violently, her shoulders pulling up to her ears as if trying to shield herself from my words. She refuses to look at Richard, keeping her eyes glued to the floor. I straighten up and turn my attention to Terrence, whose face is now slick with a sheen of cold panic. And while she is explaining that, "Terrence, why do you not explain the hush money?" I continue, projecting my voice through the room. "Why do you not tell your father-in-law how you drained the trust's commercial real estate dividends to pay off 3 separate clients who threatened to expose your gross legal malpractice? You settled out of court to save your prestigious law career, and you used my grandfather's money to keep your name out of the legal tabloids." Terrence opens his mouth, but no sound comes out. His pristine courtroom confidence has completely evaporated, leaving a terrified, desperate fraud in its place. Felicity suddenly snaps. The heavy burden of her golden child facade finally shatters. She springs up from the sofa, her fists clenched so tightly her knuckles turn white. Her face is twisted into an ugly mask of pure resentment. "Shut up," she screams at me, her voice cracking with raw hysteria. "Just shut up, Nicole. You have no idea what it is like. You have absolutely no idea what they put me through every single day of my life." She turns wildly toward our parents, pointing a shaking, erratic finger at Richard and Patricia. "You forced me to be perfect," she sobs, her carefully curled hair falling out of place and clinging to her wet cheeks. "You forced me to marry the perfect corporate lawyer and live in the perfect neighborhood and host the perfect charity galas. Perfect. Everything had to be perfect. Do you know how suffocating it is to never make a mistake? I needed an outlet. I needed something that was just for me, where nobody was judging my performance. You lost $4 million of family money playing cards online," Richard bellows, jumping back to his feet, his face turning purple with explosive rage. "You bankrupted the family legacy." "I had to," Felicity shrieks back, pacing the floor like a caged, desperate animal. She glares at me with pure venom burning in her eyes. I had to carry the entire weight of the absolute family trust on my shoulders because she was useless. Felicity points at me, tears ruining her heavy makeup, leaving dark streaks down her face. You were the garbage child, Nicole. You were the massive disappointment. You were the one they never expected anything from. You got to hide in the shadows and do whatever you wanted because nobody cared what you did. I had to smile and bleed to keep our social standing intact. I earned that money. I earned the right to spend it. Patricia steps forward, raising her hands in a desperate pleading motion. Stop it, she cries, grabbing Richard's arm tightly. Richard, do not yell at her. She made a mistake. She was under immense pressure and she made a terrible mistake, but we can fix it. Richard yanks his arm away from Patricia, looking at his wife with sudden, blistering suspicion. We can fix it, he demands, his voice dropping dangerously low. How exactly are we going to fix a $4 million deficit, Patricia? We do not have the liquidity. We do not have the assets. I reach into my pocket and pull out my smartphone. Actually, Father, I say, tapping the glass screen to open my encrypted audio files, I think you should hear exactly how Patricia planned to fix Felicity's little mistake. Patricia goes entirely rigid. Her eyes dart to my phone and a look of absolute horror washes over her features. She lunges forward, hands outstretched. Nicole, do not you dare! She screams, her voice raw with terror. I step back, effortlessly, avoiding her grasp, and press play. I hold the speaker up, so the pristine audio fills the cavernous living room. Patricia's panicked, recorded voice plays through the speaker loud and crystal clear. She is begging the senior loan officer at their primary bank. Please, you have to approve the second mortgage on the main estate, Patricia's recorded voice pleads, echoing against the walls. Richard cannot know about this. If he finds out, he will cut Felicity off completely. Just push the paperwork through using my executive power over the trust. Leverage the house. I do not care about the interest rates, just cover my daughter's margin calls before the offshore collectors contact my husband at the firm. I pause the audio and slip the phone safely back into my pocket. The silence that follows is deafening and absolute. Richard slowly turns his head to look at his wife. The color has completely drained from his face, leaving him looking fragile and suddenly very old. You mortgaged my house? Richard whispers, his voice trembling with a mixture of profound betrayal and absolute fury. You mortgaged my house. You leveraged the estate my father built to pay for her gambling debts, behind my back. Patricia burst into fresh tears, reaching out for him with shaking hands. Richard, please, I had to protect her. Terrence said he could win the money back in a settlement, but he lost the case. We were just trying to buy time. Richard explodes violently, shoving the heavy glass coffee table so hard it screeches across the rug and slams into the velvet armchair. You lying, scheming parasites! He roars, spittle flying from his lips. He turns on Terrence, grabbing the younger man violently by his expensive silk tie. I gave you everything. I trusted you to manage the portfolio, and you bled me dry to cover your own legal incompetence. Terrence shoves Richard backward, his own temper finally snapping under the pressure. Get your hands off me, old man! Terrence snarls aggressively, straightening his ruined jacket. You handed me a sinking ship. You forced me to fund your ridiculous country club lifestyle while demanding entirely unreasonable returns. I kept your pathetic facade afloat for as long as I could. Felicity screams at Terrence to stop defending himself and to do something about me. Patricia is sobbing uncontrollably, clawing at Richard's sleeve, while Richard bellows vulgar curses at Terrence. The living room descends into absolute unhinged chaos. The pristine, elegant family unit that spent 20 years treating me like dirt is now tearing each other apart, right in the middle of my living room. They are a pack of starving wolves, turning on their own, ripping each other to shreds. They have completely forgotten I am even standing there. I stand perfectly still, watching the destruction unfold and feeling a deep, profound sense of peace wash over me. The absolute family trust is dead. Their financial leverage over my life is completely gone. I have won. Suddenly, a massive, deafening crash echoes through the foyer. The heavy custom oak front door is violently kicked open, slamming against the interior wall with enough force to crack the expensive plaster. The yelling in the living room instantly ceases. Everyone freezes, turning toward the entryway in stunned, terrified silence. Footsteps echo heavily on the marble tiles, erratic and fast. Jason steps into the living room archway. He is completely unrecognizable. His tailored Italian suit jacket is torn at the shoulder and deeply wrinkled. His tie is missing entirely. His perfectly styled hair is a messy, chaotic disaster sticking up in every direction. He is breathing heavily, his chest heaving as he grips the wooden doorframe for support. He has clearly just posted bail. Jason looks around the room at the shattered family dynamics, taking in the crying and the hostility. His eyes are wide, bloodshot, and manic. Then his gaze locks onto me, standing calmly near the center of the room. A slow, terrifying grin spreads across his face, stretching into a maniacal, unhinged laugh that bounces loudly off the high ceilings. "You think you are so incredibly smart, Nicole?" Jason laughs, panting heavily as he steps onto the living room rug. "You think you orchestrated the perfect, flawless takedown." He wipes a smear of dirt from his pale cheek, his eyes burning with an intense, frenzied malice. "They gave me one phone call at the precinct, Nicole. Just one single call before they processed my paperwork and locked me in a holding cell. You thought I would call my defense lawyer. You thought I would call Terrence to beg for help." Jason laughs again, a dry, rattling wheeze that sounds barely human. "But I did not call a lawyer. I called my lead developer back at the firm. I used my emergency executive access codes before the federal agents could officially revoke my corporate credentials. I froze every single bank account tied to your precious LLC. Every single one. And I initiated a complete remote wipe of your cybersecurity firm's central servers. I wiped it all." Jason spreads his arms wide, a look of absolute manic victory on his deranged face. "I burned your entire digital fortress to the ground, Nicole. I burned it all to the ground. You have absolutely nothing left." The echo of Jason's deranged laughter bounces off the marble walls of the living room. He stands there, catching his breath, his eyes locked onto mine with a sickening mix of triumph and venom. The sheer silence in the room is deafening. Terrence releases his tight grip on Richard's tie, stepping back as the entire family processes Jason's vicious announcement. Patricia lets out a sudden, breathless gasp of relief. Felicity wipes her tear-stained face, a cruel, triumphant smile, slowly replacing her previous hysteria. They genuinely believe he has just saved them. They believe my husband has just restored the natural order of their twisted universe. Jason runs a trembling hand through his ruined hair and takes another step toward me. His expensive dress shoes leave faint scuff marks on my pristine Persian rug. "You should see your face right now, Nicole." He taunts, his voice dripping with absolute malice. "You really thought you could outsmart me. You thought you could orchestrate this grand humiliation and throw Amber and me to the feds without any consequences. I run the tech division for a reason. I built the back doors into your miserable little LLC when you first filed the paperwork. I watched you hide your money, and I let you do it because I knew the second you stepped out of line, I could press a single button and vaporize your entire life." Richard suddenly bursts into laughter, a booming sound of pure, arrogant vindication. He claps his hands together, stepping toward Jason as if the man is a conquering hero. "That is brilliant, Jason." My father cheers, his face flushed with renewed superiority. "I always said you were the smartest man in the room. You wiped her out completely. That will teach this ungrateful girl to respect the family hierarchy." Jason does not even acknowledge my father. His manic gaze remains fixed entirely on me. He points a finger at my face, his expression twisting into a sneer of profound disgust. "By tomorrow morning, you will be absolutely destitute," he growls, pacing slowly like a predator circling its prey. "You will not be able to buy a cup of coffee. You will be on your knees begging me for grocery money, just like you begged me to let you keep those pathetic college friends of yours when we first got married. Do you remember that, Nicole? Do you remember how you cried when I forced you to cut them off?" They were nobodies. They worked retail and drove used cars, and they definitely were not our class of people. I isolated you from them to protect my image, and now I have isolated you from your own money for the exact same reason. You belong to me. Your wealth belongs to me. And right now, you are nothing but a bankrupt housewife standing in a home she can no longer afford. Felicity crosses her arms, stepping up right beside Jason. She looks at me with absolute contempt. You hear that, Nicole? She snaps. You are finished. We are taking this house to cover Jason's legal fees, and you are going to pack your bags and leave. Terrence was right. You are going to be living on the street. I let their taunts wash over me. I do not flinch. I do not cry. I do not show a single ounce of the panic they are so desperately hoping to see. I simply reach into the front pocket of my tailored trousers. My hand closes around a cold piece of metal. I pull my hand out and slowly raise my fist, opening my fingers to reveal a small, solid black USB flash drive resting in the center of my palm. Jason stares at the drive. His manic smile falters slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing his bloodshot eyes. What is that? He demands, his voice losing a fraction of its arrogant edge. Another useless piece of paper. I close my hand around the drive and take a slow, deliberate step toward him. You are a tech executive, Jason. I say, my voice perfectly level, carrying clearly through the silent room. But you are a manager. You look at spreadsheets and you delegate tasks. I am a cybersecurity engineer. I build digital architectures that withstand attacks from international syndicates. Did you honestly believe I would leave my entire financial infrastructure vulnerable to a man who uses the same password for his email and his golf club membership? The color begins to drain from Jason's face. He swallows hard, his eyes darting from my face to my clenched fist. I did not just discover your little corporate espionage plot this morning, Jason. I continue walking closer until I am standing just a few feet away from him. I caught you and Amber planning to steal those crypto keys 3 months ago. I intercepted your emails. I tracked your burner phones. I knew exactly what you were planning to do, and I knew exactly how you would react when I finally cornered you. So I built a sandbox. What are you talking about? Jason whispers, his voice suddenly hoarse. I'm talking about a decoy server. I reply, a genuine smile finally touching my lips. I cloned the superficial directory of my LLC. I filled it with dummy financial records, fake routing numbers, and mirror accounts. I created an entire phantom network that looked exactly like my real digital fortress, and I left the back door wide open specifically for you. When you used your one phone call from the holding cell to execute your little override, you did not touch a single penny of my actual money. You did not wipe my corporate servers. Jason staggers backward as if he has been physically struck. He bumps into the glass coffee table, his hands gripping the edge to steady himself. No, he gasps, shaking his head wildly. No, I checked the directories. I saw the balances. I wiped the main drive. You wiped a federally monitored honeypot. I state, my voice ringing with absolute finality. A honeypot that was directly linked to the FBI Cybercrime Division. By accessing that decoy server and executing a malicious wipe command from a police precinct, you did not just destroy fake data. You actively committed a Class A federal cybercrime while out on bail for corporate theft, and you used your lead developer's credentials to do it, making him an accessory to a federal offense. The realization hits the room like a physical shockwave. Terrence stumbles back, his legal mind instantly processing the catastrophic magnitude of what Jason has just done. You idiot, Terrence breathes out, staring at Jason in absolute horror. You breached a monitored federal server. They will bury you under the jail. Patricia lets out a strangled cry, burying her face in her hands. Richard stands frozen, his jaw slack, his eyes wide with a terror he cannot hide. Felicity looks frantically between Jason and me, her golden child arrogance completely shattered by the reality of federal prison. Jason drops to his knees, clutching his head. He pulls at his hair, letting out a pathetic whimpering sound that is entirely devoid of his previous bravado. No, 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 he mutters over and over, rocking back and forth on the expensive rug. I just wanted to teach you a lesson. I just wanted my money. Before anyone else can speak, a piercing sound shatters the quiet suburban evening. The sharp, urgent wail of multiple police sirens echoes down the street, growing louder by the second. The shrieking noise surrounds the estate, completely deafening. Flashing red and blue lights suddenly flood the living room, casting erratic, dancing shadows across the high vaulted ceiling and illuminating the terrified faces of my family. The sound of slamming car doors echoes from the driveway. Heavy booted footsteps hit the front porch. The heavy double doors of my foyer are thrust open with enough violent force that the brass handles gouge deep marks into the entryway plaster. 4 uniformed police officers storm into the living room, their hands resting cautiously on their utility belts. Right behind them walks a tall, sharp-featured man in a tailored charcoal suit. I recognize him immediately. It is Marcus Vance, the vice president of corporate security at Jason's tech firm. The tension in the room instantly skyrockets, suffocating the air out of the space. The moment the officers step onto the Persian rug, Jason undergoes a miraculous theatrical transformation. The manic, deranged villain who was just gloating about destroying my life completely vanishes. In his place stands a broken, terrified victim. He stumbles forward, practically throwing himself toward the lead police officer. "Thank God you are here!" Jason gasps, his voice trembling with a masterful display of manufactured panic. He points a shaking finger directly at me, his eyes wide with fake terror. She is a rogue hacker. My wife has completely lost her mind. She framed me and my innocent secretary Amber at the airport this morning. She planted that stolen military-grade hard drive in Amber's luggage to ruin my career and destroy my reputation. Marcus Vance steps forward, his expression hardened into a mask of corporate fury. He glares at me as if I am the most dangerous person in the state. "The FBI just notified our executive board of a massive cybersecurity breach," Marcus announces, his voice echoing loudly. "Someone used Jason's executive credentials to access a federally monitored honeypot server. Jason contacted me from the precinct, claiming his wife stole his login tokens, cloned his biometric data, and orchestrated this entire $20 million crypto theft to make it look like an inside job. She is trying to burn our company to the ground." Jason nods vigorously, rubbing his face to produce fake tears. "She is insanely jealous of my success," he whimpers, putting on the performance of a lifetime. "When she found out I was going on a business trip, she completely snapped. She is an expert in digital espionage. She hacked my accounts and set me up to take the fall. You have to arrest her immediately before she destroys any more evidence." Before I can even open my mouth to dismantle his pathetic narrative, my mother seizes the opportunity. Patricia realizes that if I go to federal prison, she and Richard might somehow find a way to manipulate my assets and save themselves from the $4 million bankruptcy she created. She rushes toward the police officers, clutching a lace handkerchief to her chest and sobbing with perfect practiced hysteria. "It is absolutely true!" Officer Patricia cries, her voice breaking dramatically. "My daughter is a pathological liar and she is deeply disturbed. She has a terrible history of stealing and manipulating people. She has been doing it since she was a teenager." The lead officer frowns, pulling out a notepad. "What do you mean, ma'am?" he asks. Patricia wipes a fake tear from her cheek, pointing a condemning finger at me. "When Nicole was 15 years old, she was caught stealing thousands of dollars in diamond jewelry from a high-end luxury department store downtown. The security guards caught her red-handed with the bracelets shoved into her pockets. I had to personally pay the store manager a massive cash bribe just to keep my daughter out of juvenile detention. She is a compulsive thief. She has always been a criminal." Felicity eagerly jumps in, nodding her head in vigorous agreement. "She is a complete kleptomaniac, officer." Felicity lies smoothly, her eyes shining with malicious delight. "She has been stealing from our family for years. We just kept quiet to protect her, but Jason is telling the truth." She framed him. I stand perfectly still near the glass coffee table, staring at the woman who gave birth to me. I marvel at her absolute lack of a soul. 15 years ago, Felicity was the one caught stuffing diamond tennis bracelets into her designer purse. Patricia had dragged me into the back security office, screaming and crying. She forced me to confess to the crime on tape. She paid the bribe and made me take the permanent blame solely to ensure that Felicity's pristine academic record remained completely spotless for her Ivy League college applications. I took the devastating fall so the family's golden child could shine. And now Patricia is using the exact same playbook, sacrificing me to the authorities to save her own skin. Terrence and Richard remain quiet, watching the scene unfold with desperate, greedy hope in their eyes. They are waiting for the police to slap handcuffs on my wrists so they can swoop in and reclaim the estate. I do not scream. I do not panic. I do not waste my breath defending myself against the ghost of a 15-year-old lie. I slowly smooth the front of my blouse and turn my attention directly to the lead police officer and the corporate security vice president, Chief Reynolds. I say, my voice remarkably calm and steady, cutting through the hysterical noise of my family. I recognize your badge from the charity galas my husband forced me to attend. Before you decide to read me my Miranda rights or listen to another syllable of my mother's entirely fabricated history, I highly suggest you direct your attention to the wall behind me. Marcus Vance frowns, crossing his arms. We are not here to play games, Nicole, he snaps. Neither am I, Marcus, I reply, my tone chillingly flat. I reach into my pocket and pull out my smartphone. I do not break eye contact with Jason as I unlock the device. His fake tears immediately stop. A flicker of genuine uncertainty crosses his face. I tap the screen, navigating to a secured, encrypted application. I press the casting icon, sending the signal directly to the massive 75-inch flat-screen television mounted elegantly above the marble fireplace. The massive screen instantly wakes from its sleep mode. A bright white loading bar flashes rapidly across the pitch-black display, illuminating the stunned faces of the police officers and my treacherous family. The bar hits 100% with a sharp electronic chime. The screen flickers to life, washing the living room in a pale clinical glow. It opens a crisp, high-definition, highly classified hidden camera feed broadcasting directly from the interior of Jason's private corporate corner office. The high-definition feed snaps into crystal-clear focus, displaying the expansive interior of Jason's private corner office at the corporate headquarters. The digital timestamp glowing in the bottom right corner indicates the footage was recorded just 48 hours ago. The ambient lighting of the office casts a sleek, modern glow over the expensive mahogany furniture. Right in the center of the screen, Jason is leaning heavily against the edge of his massive desk. Amber, his 24-year-old secretary, is perched directly on top of the polished wood. Her skirt is hiked up around her thighs and her arms are wrapped tightly around Jason's neck. They are locked in a heavy, intimate embrace, completely oblivious to the camera hidden perfectly inside the smoke detector above them. In my living room, the silence is so absolute it feels like the air has been sucked out of the space. Patricia lets out a small, strangled gasp, clamping a hand over her mouth. Marcus Vance steps closer to the television, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle twitches in his cheek. On the screen, Jason finally pulls away from Amber. He adjusts his tie, breathing heavily, and runs a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Amber slides off the desk, smoothing down her skirt with a giddy, breathless giggle. She reaches into her designer handbag resting on the leather chair nearby and pulls out a small, heavy metallic casing. Is it all there? Amber asks on the television feed, handing the casing to Jason. Jason takes the drive, weighing it in his hand with a greedy, satisfied smirk. Every single penny, he replies, his voice echoing crisply through my living room speakers. $20 million in untraceable cryptocurrency stripped right out of the corporate holding accounts. Amber bites her lip, looking suddenly nervous. How are we getting it past airport security, Jason? If they flag the encrypted drive in your briefcase, the corporate auditors will be notified instantly. Jason laughs, tapping the metal drive against his chin. I am not carrying it, you idiot, he says on the screen. Nicole is packing for her weekend trip tomorrow. She leaves her luggage sitting open in the bedroom while she runs her errands. I'm going to slip this right into the lining of her leather tote bag. She will carry $20 million right past federal security, and she will not have a single clue. She is the perfect blind mule. She is so completely oblivious she will just carry it right to our drop point. In the living room, Chief Reynolds turns his head slowly, looking directly at Jason. The police officer's hand drops instinctively to rest on the handle of his service weapon. That is a deep fake. Jason stammers, backing away from the police officers, his voice cracking with sheer panic. She fabricated that video. It is AI generated. Do not listen to it. Shut your mouth! Mr. Vance snaps, his voice cracking like a whip. On the television screen, Amber traces a finger down Jason's lapel, looking up at him through her eyelashes. But what if she finds it, Jason? What if her family finds out? They are so wealthy and powerful. What if her parents come after us? Jason throws his head back and laughs, a loud, booming sound of pure, unadulterated arrogance. Nicole's family, he mocks, waving his hand dismissively. Richard is a pompous fool who thinks he is a king just because he wears expensive watches. And Patricia is nothing but a walking wallet, desperately trying to buy social relevance. They are so busy parading around their pathetic country club, they do not even realize their own trust fund is bleeding out. They are completely useless. I glance over at my parents. Richard looks as though he has been physically struck in the chest with a sledgehammer. His face is ashen, his mouth hanging slightly open as he stares at the screen. The man he championed, the son-in-law he constantly compared me against, the man he literally just praised for destroying me, has just called him a pompous fool to his mistress. Patricia looks physically ill, her eyes darting frantically as the reality of Jason's absolute contempt for her washes away the last shred of her dignity. But what about the federal investigators? Amber presses on the video, her voice pitching higher with anxiety. If the corporate security team tracks the breach, they will trace the back door right to your terminal. Jason leans forward, pulling Amber close by the waist. A wicked, calculating smile spreads across his face. Do not worry about the legal footprint, he tells her, pressing a kiss to her neck. I covered our tracks perfectly. I used Terrence's bar credentials and his home IP address through a proxy VPN to forge the back door. Amber's eyes widen. Your brother-in-law? Jason nods, his smile widening into a nasty grin. Exactly. If the feds catch on, they will trace the breach straight to his personal laptop. Let that arrogant lawyer take the fall. He is already drowning in malpractice lawsuits anyway, so what is one federal cybercrime added to the pile? He will go away for 20 years and we will be sitting on a beach with $20 million. The video feed freezes on Jason's laughing face, pausing perfectly as my casting app reaches the end of the file. The silence that descends upon my living room is thick, toxic, and incredibly dangerous. Chief Reynolds pulls his radio from his belt, pressing the button to call for backup. Marcus Vance is staring at Jason with a look of pure corporate execution, ready to authorize a legal team to bury Jason beneath the prison. But the true danger in the room is not the police or the corporate vice president. Terrence has not moved a single muscle since his name was spoken on the television. He stands near the edge of the crushed coffee table, his expensive suit jacket hanging off his shoulders. The revelation crashes over him in real time. He is already facing financial ruin. He is already facing professional disbarment from his malpractice. And now he realizes the man standing 3 feet away from him deliberately orchestrated a $20 million federal cybercrime and framed him to take the absolute downfall. Terrence turns his head very slowly. The movement is stiff, mechanical, like a machine winding up to strike. The color has entirely vanished from his face, leaving behind a pale, sickly white mask. The veins in his neck are bulging, pressing against his collar. Jason takes one look at Terrence and takes a frantic, terrified step backward, raising his hands defensively. Terrence, wait. Jason pleads, his voice a pathetic squeak. Terrence, I can explain. Terrence does not say a word. His eyes are wide, completely black, and filled with a pure, unchecked homicidal rage. Terrence lets out a guttural, animalistic roar that tears through his throat. He does not hesitate for a single fraction of a second. He lunges straight across the seating area, completely clearing the velvet armchair. His heavy leather shoes clip the edge of the glass coffee table, sending it shattering into 1,000 jagged pieces across the Persian rug. He slams into Jason with the force of a runaway freight train, tackling him violently to the hardwood floor. Jason screams in sheer terror as his back hits the ground with a sickening crack. Terrence instantly straddles his chest, pinning his arms down with his knees. The pristine, prestigious corporate lawyer is entirely gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered man who has just watched his entire life burn to ash. Terrence raises his fists and brings them down hard against Jason's face. The sound of knuckles connecting with bone echoes sharply through the living room. "You arrogant, parasitic little worm!" Terrence screams, his voice cracking with absolute fury, raining blow after blow upon Jason. "You framed me. You used my credentials to cover your tracks. I sacrificed my entire firm's integrity to protect this miserable family. I cooked the books for your offshore accounts to hide the money you were siphoning. I jeopardized everything I ever built to keep you from going under, and this is how you repay me. You set me up for a federal cybercrime." Jason thrashes wildly, trying to block the punches, but Terrence is fueled by pure, unadulterated panic. Blood bursts from Jason's nose, splattering across his ruined designer shirt. "I should have let you rot." Terrence bellows, grabbing Jason by his collar and slamming his head back against the floorboards. "I should have let you rot in that holding cell 5 years ago. Do you hear me? When you wrapped your Porsche around a telephone pole, drunk out of your mind, I should have walked away. You could barely stand up, you reeked of alcohol, and I paid off the precinct to bury that DU. I just so Patricia would not suffer a social scandal at her pathetic country club. I put my law license on the line to erase your criminal record. I saved you, and you try to send me to federal prison." Patricia shrieks at the top of her lungs, covering her ears as the dirty secrets of her perfect family are broadcast directly to the police officers standing in her living room. Her immaculate country club reputation is disintegrating right in front of her eyes. Felicity is screaming hysterically, grabbing at her hair, paralyzed by the sheer violence of her husband, beating my husband to a bloody pulp. Chief Reynolds snaps out of his momentary shock. "Break it up," he roars, gesturing sharply to his officers. "Get him off." 3 heavily armed police officers rush forward, their heavy boots crunching over the broken glass of the coffee table. They grab Terrence by the shoulders, hauling him forcefully off Jason's battered body. Terrence fights them, kicking and thrashing, his expensive suit completely shredded, but the officers easily overpower him. They slam Terrence face first into the wall, knocking the remaining fight out of him. "Get your hands behind your back!" an officer barks forcefully, twisting Terrence's arms and locking cold steel handcuffs tightly around his wrists. "Terrence Vanderbilt, you are under arrest for physical assault and battery. Furthermore, based on the digital evidence just presented, you are being detained as a primary accessory to corporate espionage and federal cyber fraud." Terrence stops struggling. He sags against the wall, the fight leaving him instantly as the cold, hard reality of his ruined career finally sets in. On the floor, Jason is coughing and spitting blood. He tries to crawl away, whimpering pitifully as he reaches a hand out toward Marcus Vance. "Marcus," he gasps, wiping blood from his mouth. "Marcus, you have to believe me. She set this up. Nicole orchestrated this whole thing to ruin me." Marcus Vance looks down at Jason with an expression of absolute corporate disgust. He does not even blink. "Save it for the federal prosecutors," Jason Marcus says, his voice colder than ice. "You are a liability and you are finished." 2 officers haul Jason up from the floor, roughly twisting his arms behind his back and snapping handcuffs onto his wrists. He winces, groaning in pain as the metal bites into his skin. "Jason Blackwood," Chief Reynolds says, stepping right in front of him, "you are under arrest for grand larceny, corporate espionage, and accessing a federally monitored honeypot server. You have the right to remain silent. I highly suggest you use it." "No," Jason screams, thrashing wildly against the officer's grip as they begin to march him toward the front door. "You cannot do this. I am a vice president. I am a tech executive. Nicole, you psycho, tell them the truth." His pathetic screams fade into the crisp night air as the officers drag him out of the house and shove him into the back of a waiting police cruiser. Terrence is marched out right behind him, his head hung low in utter defeat, entirely silent as he is pushed into a separate patrol car. The red and blue lights flash through the living room windows, casting long, eerie shadows over the debris. Felicity drops to her knees on the ruined Persian rug, sobbing uncontrollably. Her perfect marriage, her perfect wealth, and her perfect status have all evaporated in the span of 10 minutes. Patricia is leaning against the wall, clutching her chest, and weeping silently. Richard is staring blankly at the empty doorway, looking like a man who has just been hollowed out from the inside. The silence in the living room slowly returns, broken only by Felicity's pathetic whimpering. I take a deep, steadying breath, feeling the adrenaline slowly recede from my veins. The trap worked flawlessly. The toxic parasitic men who tried to bleed me dry are currently sitting in the back of police cruisers facing decades in federal prison. I look over at Marcus Vance, expecting him to follow the officers out the door. Instead, the corporate representative remains standing in the center of the room. He reaches up slowly, adjusting his expensive silk tie and smoothing the lapels of his tailored charcoal suit. He turns his head and fixes his sharp, predatory gaze directly on me. His expression is completely unreadable, a perfectly blank slate of corporate calculation. He takes a slow, deliberate step toward me, his expensive leather shoes crunching softly against a stray piece of broken glass. "That was an incredibly impressive display," Nicole Marcus says, his voice smooth and terrifyingly calm. "You completely dismantled him. You protected your own assets, and you handed us the exact evidence we needed to prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law. I must admit, your technical skills are entirely unparalleled." I hold his gaze, refusing to back down. "Thank you, Marcus," I reply, keeping my tone entirely neutral. "I assume Horizon Tech will be pressing full charges." "Oh, absolutely," Marcus says, offering a smile that resembles a shark baring its teeth. "We will be pursuing maximum criminal penalties against Jason and his accomplices. However, there is still the matter of the massive financial damage he caused to our internal systems before he was apprehended." I narrow my eyes slightly, feeling a sudden, unexpected chill wash over me. "That sounds like a corporate legal issue, Marcus. Jason is going to prison. You can seize whatever assets he has left to cover your losses." Marcus stops directly in front of me, tilting his head slightly. He reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out a sleek silver pen, rolling it thoughtfully between his fingers. "That is the problem," Nicole Marcus says, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet register. "Jason does not have any assets left. You made sure of that. But Horizon Tech suffered exactly $5 million in infrastructural damages due to his rogue access tonight. The board of directors expects full financial restitution immediately." He pauses, letting the heavy silence stretch between us. He looks around the ruined living room, glancing at my sobbing mother and my catatonic father before locking his eyes back onto mine. And as his legal spouse, Marcus continues, his smile widening slightly into something incredibly ruthless. "Under state marital debt laws, you share liability for the financial obligations he incurs during the marriage. You may have protected your personal trust, Nicole, but legally, you are now entirely liable for the $5 million in corporate damages your husband just caused to our infrastructure." The air in the living room remains heavy with the scent of ozone and the lingering toxicity of the recent arrests, but a new, more dangerous atmosphere begins to permeate the space. Patricia is no longer weeping. She is straightening her pearls, her eyes bright with a sharp, predatory satisfaction. The news that I am liable for $5 million has acted like a spiritual stimulant for her. She stands up, brushing invisible lint from her silk trousers, and fixes me with a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. Finally, she sneers, her voice regaining that familiar brittle edge of superiority. "You thought you were so clever, didn't you? You thought you could orchestrate this little police raid, destroy Jason, and walk away clean." She glances toward the door where the police cruisers are pulling away, then looks back at me with a grin that makes my skin crawl. "You really thought you were the smartest person in the room. But look at you now, standing there with your precious dignity while you are saddled with a $5 million debt that will follow you for the rest of your life." Felicity stands up as well, smoothing her ruined dress, her eyes reflecting the same hateful joy. "It is poetic, really," she says, her voice low and mocking. "You tried to burn our world down, and now you have nothing left to build your own. You are broke, Nicole. You are legally, financially, and professionally ruined. I hope you enjoy the bankruptcy filings. They are such a tedious process, but I imagine you will have plenty of time to learn about them while you are working off that debt for the next 20 years. I stand perfectly still, my hands resting at my sides. I do not offer them the satisfaction of a panicked expression or a desperate plea. I wait until they have finished their little performance, until their gloating has filled the entire room, and then I slowly reach into the small, structured bag I have kept on the sideboard. My movements are precise and deliberate. I pull out a single, thick, stapled document. I do not look at Patricia or Felicity. I hold the papers out toward Marcus Vance. I suggest you read this before you start talking about liability. I say, my voice steady, cutting through their laughter like a razor. Marcus looks at the document, his brow furrowing in genuine confusion. He takes it from me, his movements slow and methodical. He scans the front page, then flips to the second, his eyes moving rapidly across the dense legal text. He stops at the third page, his thumb tracing a specific paragraph. Section 4B, I say, pointing to the spot on the page as he reads. It is a post-nuptial agreement signed and notarized 1 month ago. It is legally binding. Jason signed it under a stack of LLC tax renewals. He did not even read the document because he was too busy bragging about his upcoming bonus and complaining about the paperwork. Marcus looks up, his expression shifting from detached corporate boredom to something resembling professional admiration. He reads the paragraph out loud, his voice echoing in the silent room. Any debt, fines, or restitution stemming from corporate fraud, embezzlement, or marital infidelity falls 100% on the personal assets and liabilities of the signing spouse, Jason Blackwood. Any and all joint assets are strictly protected from such liabilities regardless of pre-existing co-signature status. I watch as the blood drains from Patricia's face for the second time that night. Felicity's jaw goes slack. Marcus Vance continues to read, his eyes gleaming with cold, calculating interest. The document is exhaustive, I add, watching the panic set in across the room. It covers every contingency. It explicitly insulates me from any financial fallout related to Jason's activities. Legally, the debt is his and his alone. Marcus slowly folds the document and slips it into his inner suit pocket. He looks at me with a nod that serves as the highest compliment I have ever received. That is quite the shield, Nicole, he says. It is rare to see such foresight in such a volatile marriage. He then turns his attention away from me, focusing his gaze on my parents. The transition is instantaneous. His smile is gone, replaced by the detached, lethal professionalism of a corporate executioner. He steps toward Richard, who is still standing near the fireplace, clutching his drink as if it were a life raft. Since the $5 million in damages now rests entirely on Jason Blackwood's personal estate, we must look to the collateral he pledged to secure his corporate surety bond. Marcus explains, his voice smooth and conversational. When Jason was promoted to vice president, he was required to post a significant collateral bond against the company's insurance policy. To secure that bond, he listed several high-value assets. I see the exact moment Richard realizes what is happening. The glass in his hand slips, hitting the rug with a dull thud. He did not list his own assets, Marcus continues, his eyes locking onto my father. He did not have enough liquid capital to cover the $5 million requirement. Instead, he listed the primary residential property of his marital sponsors as the guarantor of the debt. He listed your family estate. The silence that follows is absolute. Patricia lets out a small, high-pitched keening sound. The family estate. The house they have spent 40 years polishing, the house that represents every social victory they have ever achieved. The house where they hosted the dinners, where they looked down on me. It is gone. Your property has been under a lien for the past 18 months, Marcus says, pulling a tablet from his bag and tapping the screen. A legal notice appears, displaying a digital image of the property deed, with the corporate lien clearly highlighted. We have already initiated the seizure process for the collateral. As of this morning, the $5 million is being moved from the bond account directly into the company's ledger. Since Jason has no assets to reimburse the bond, we are legally entitled to move forward with the foreclosure on the residential property listed as the primary guarantee. Richard stumbles back his legs, failing him as he collapses into the wingback chair. "It is impossible," he whispers, his voice trembling. That house. That house is our legacy." "It is a corporate asset now," Marcus replies. "The transfer of title is already in motion. We will have the eviction notice served within 48 hours." I watch the scene unfold, a detached observer in the house where I was once treated as an uninvited guest. My mother is sobbing, but her tears have shifted. They are no longer the tears of a woman gloating about my ruin. They are the tears of a woman who has just realized she is about to be homeless, stripped of her status, her home, and her pride. Patricia looks at me, her eyes wide with a desperate, pleading terror. "Nicole, please," she whispers, her voice cracked and small. "You have to do something. You have the money now. You have the protection. You have to help us." I look at her, really look at her, and I see the woman who stood by and watched Jason frame me. The woman who laughed when I was belittled, the woman who thought my destruction was a fair price for her continued social standing. "I am sorry, Patricia." I say, my voice devoid of any warmth or pretense. "I am just a person who made bad choices according to you. I am just a blind mule. I am just an oblivious woman. And as you said, I have my own debts and my own life to manage. I have no room for complications in my atmosphere." I walked toward the front door, pausing only once to look at the mess of the shattered coffee table, the crying women, and the broken man in the chair. "I have everything I need," I say, opening the heavy double doors. The storm outside has stopped, the night air cool and clean against my face. I step out onto the porch, leaving the hollow wreckage of their lives behind me. I have finally cleared my own path, and for the first time in years, the future ahead of me is entirely my own. I turn back from the cool night air and face the interior of my home. The silence following Marcus Vance's departure is heavy, but it shatters quickly. Inside my foyer, Richard and Patricia are collapsing under the crushing weight of their new reality. The corporate machine Jason unleashed is not just going to take their beloved estate. It is going to seize every single asset tied to that property to satisfy the $5 million corporate bond. The bank will auction off their imported cars, their antique furniture, their carefully curated art collection, and every status symbol they have hoarded for decades. The federal receivership will strip them down to the bone, leaving them with absolutely nothing. Richard looks up from the armchair, his eyes bloodshot and wide with a feral panic. He scrambles to his feet, tripping over the corner of the ruined Persian rug. He practically crawls toward the threshold where I am standing. His usual commanding, aristocratic posture is entirely eradicated. He looks exactly like what he is, a pathetic, hollow shell of a man who has just lost his only source of power. "Nicole," he gasps, grabbing the edge of the heavy oak doorframe to steady himself. "You have to stop this. You have your own company. You have those hidden accounts you protected from Jason. You have the capital. You can buy the estate back from the receivership. You can pay off the corporate bond before the bank takes the deed." I stare at him, letting his frantic, heavy breathing fill the space between us. He reaches out a trembling hand, trying to grasp my arm, but I smoothly step backward out of his reach. "Please, Nicole." Richard begs, his voice cracking into a humiliating, desperate whine. "That house is our entire lineage. It is our bloodline. It is the only thing we have left to our name. If you do this, if you save us, I swear everything will change. We will make you a full partner in what is left of my law firm. We will put your name on the primary family trust. We will finally treat you like a real daughter. I promise you, Nicole, you will have the absolute respect you have always wanted." The audacity of his plea is almost breathtaking. For 30 years, he treated me like an unwanted stray dog. He watched his wife and his golden child strip away my self-esteem for sport. He actively championed the man who tried to send me to federal prison just moments ago. And now that he is staring down the barrel of absolute poverty, he actually thinks he can buy my salvation with the promise of a father's love. A love that should have been unconditionally mine from the day I was born. I look at him with absolute zero empathy. My expression does not shift a single fraction of an inch. I feel absolutely nothing for this man. No anger, no sadness, no lingering childhood desire for his validation. There is only ice. You do not have a law firm left to offer me, Richard. I say, my voice chillingly flat. Terrence just took your entire professional reputation down with him when he was arrested for corporate espionage. And as for treating me like a real daughter, you lost that privilege the day you stood in this very room and smiled while Jason tried to frame me for a federal felony. Patricia wails from the living room, a horrible grating sound of pure despair. You cannot do this to your own mother. Patricia screams, stumbling toward the hallway, her expensive makeup running down her face in dark, streaky tears. Where are we supposed to go? We have no liquid cash. The corporate lawyers are going to freeze our bank accounts by morning. We will be out on the street like common criminals. You made your bed, Patricia, I tell her, staring directly into her panic-stricken eyes. Now sleep in it. Get off my property. I gesture sharply toward the driveway, pointing out into the darkness. I want all of you out of my house right now. Richard recoils as if physically struck, but he knows he has no leverage left. He grabs Patricia by the arm, pulling her roughly toward the exit. She is sobbing uncontrollably, stumbling over her designer heels as they shuffle past me onto the porch. They look like two ghosts fading away into the night, stripped of every single thing that ever made them feel superior to the rest of the world. But Felicity does not move. She is still standing in the center of my living room, surrounded by the shattered glass of the coffee table. Her expensive dress is ruined, her husband is sitting in a police cruiser, her family is destitute, and her mind has completely snapped under the pressure. She glares at me with a venomous, psychotic hatred. Her hands are curled into tight fists, and she is shaking with a rage she can no longer control. I am not going anywhere, Felicity snarls, planting her feet firmly into the rug. You ruined my husband. You took my inheritance. You destroyed my life. I am not stepping 1 foot outside into the cold so you can sit here and gloat. I know the law, Nicole. You cannot just throw me out into the street in the middle of the night. I have squatter's rights. I am a resident of this family, and I am claiming sanctuary in this house. You will have to drag me out kicking and screaming. She crosses her arms, lifting her chin in a pathetic display of arrogance. Even now, with her entire world reduced to rubble, she actually thinks she can still dictate the rules. She actually thinks she can force her presence onto my territory, just like she has done every single day of our lives. I do not argue with her. I do not raise my voice or take the bait. I simply pull my smartphone from my jacket pocket. I tap the screen, opening my advanced smart home security application. I maintain dead eye contact with my sister as my thumb presses the master override icon. With a sharp electronic chirp, the climate control system instantly shuts down, killing the heat to the entire house. A heavy mechanical thud echoes through the hallways as the interior smart doors slam shut and engage their deadbolts, locking down the perimeter and sealing off the rest of the house from the living room. The overhead lights shift from a warm white to a harsh clinical security setting. Felicity jumps, her eyes darting around the suddenly hostile environment as she realizes she is completely boxed in. I step backward over the threshold onto the porch, safely outside the blast zone, and press the final red button on my screen. A deafening, ear-piercing security alarm erupts from the hidden speakers in the living room ceiling. Felicity shrieks, clapping both hands tightly over her ears as the high-decibel siren blares through the empty house. Her bravado about squatter rights instantly evaporates under the physical pain of the alarm. She spins around, her designer heels slipping on the hardwood floor, and scrambles blindly toward the open front door. She practically throws herself over the threshold, stumbling out into the freezing night air to join my ruined parents in the driveway. The moment her foot clears the doorway, I press a final command on my screen. The heavy oak doors swing shut on their motorized hinges, locking with a deep, resonant thud. The alarm cuts off instantly, leaving the house bathed in absolute perfect silence. I watch through the reinforced glass as the three of them huddle together in the cold, completely locked out of the world they thought they owned. 12 hours later, the atmosphere shifts from the quiet satisfaction of my reclaimed home to the harsh, sterile fluorescent glare of the downtown Federal Police Precinct. I am standing in a dimly lit observation booth, my arms crossed over my chest. Beside me stand Chief Reynolds and two senior detectives from the Federal Cybercrime Division. We are staring through a thick pane of two-way glass, looking directly into a gray cinder block interrogation room. Amber is sitting at the bolted metal table. She has spent the entire night in a holding cell, but she is already attempting to work her magic. Her designer clothes are rumpled, her blonde hair is perfectly messy, and she has smudged her mascara just enough to look like a tragic broken victim without looking entirely grotesque. She is currently weeping into a tissue, putting on a masterclass performance for the federal agent sitting across from her. I had absolutely no idea what he was actually doing. Amber sobs, her voice trembling with manufactured fragility. You have to believe me. He is the vice president of the company. I am just a 24-year-old assistant. He told me if I did not help him transfer those files, he would ruin my career. He said he would blacklist me in the tech industry and I would never work again. He completely manipulated me. The federal agent leans back in his chair, his face impassive. So you are claiming you did not know the encrypted hard drive contained $20 million in stolen cryptocurrency. Amber shakes her head vigorously, her eyes wide and pleading. Of course not, she cries, clutching the tissue to her chest. He told me it was just a backup of some offshore corporate tax documents. He said the executive board needed them transported quietly to avoid a media scandal. I was terrified of him. He is an older, powerful man, and I was just an innocent young girl trying to keep my job. I only went along with it because I was scared of what he would do to me. She takes a shaky breath, letting a single perfect tear roll down her cheek. I will tell you everything you want to know about his operation, Amber whispers, leaning forward across the metal table. I will testify against Jason in open court. I will give you every password and every meeting date he ever set up. Just please do not send me to prison. I was just his pawn. The federal agent writes something down on his legal pad, his expression unreadable. He stands up from the table, telling Amber to sit tight before he exits the interrogation room and steps into our observation booth. The heavy metal door clicks shut behind him. He lets out a long, tired sigh and looks over at Chief Reynolds. She is spinning a very solid victim narrative, the agent says, rubbing the back of his neck. She is playing the naive, manipulated subordinate card perfectly. If she sticks to this story and offers to testify against Jason as the sole mastermind, the district attorney might actually bite. They love a clean conviction on a corporate executive, and she is offering us Jason on a silver platter. They might offer her a plea deal with 0 jail time, just probation and community service if she turns state's witness. I let out a sharp, genuine laugh. The sound cuts through the quiet observation booth, causing all 3 law enforcement officers to turn and look at me. She is not going to get a plea deal, I say, my voice ringing with absolute certainty. And she is certainly not an innocent young girl. I reach into my leather tote bag and pull out a sleek black titanium flash drive. I hold it up under the fluorescent lights, letting it catch the glare. What is that? The cybercrime detective asks, stepping closer. Amber made a fatal, catastrophic mistake about 3 weeks ago, I explain, keeping my eyes fixed on the crying girl through the two-way glass. She thought she was so clever sleeping in my bed while I was supposedly out of town. But she connected her personal smartphone and her encrypted tablet to Jason's home Wi-Fi network. She did not realize that I had already reconfigured the entire network architecture. My router was running a highly aggressive packet sniffer. The moment her devices connected, my system bypassed her firewalls, captured her encrypted backup files, and scraped every single master password she uses. I hold the flash drive out to the cyber detective. He takes it, looking at me with a mixture of shock and profound professional respect. These are the root decryption keys to every personal device she owns, I tell him. You do not need to subpoena Apple or Google, and you do not need her to voluntarily unlock her phone. Plug this into your terminal, and you will have full, unrestricted access to her entire digital footprint in less than 30 seconds. The cyber detective does not waste a single moment. He immediately turns to the secure terminal set up in the corner of the observation booth. He inserts my flash drive and types a rapid series of commands on his keyboard. A progress bar flashes across the monitor, filling up instantly. With a sharp electronic ping, Amber's heavily encrypted hidden folders burst open on the screen, displaying thousands of messages, bank transfers, and hidden applications. The detective's eyes widen as he scrolls through the decrypted data. He clicks on a hidden folder labeled Overseas Contingencies, and the contents spill across the dual monitors. "Oh my God," the detective whispers, leaning closer to the screen. She was not just a willing accomplice, she was orchestrating a complete double cross. Chief Reynolds steps up behind him, staring at the glowing monitors. "What are we looking at here?" he asks. The detective points to a series of digital receipts and automated scripts. Amber had absolutely zero intention of running away with Jason. The detective explains, his voice laced with disbelief. "Look at this. She purchased a forged Romanian passport under the alias Elena Rostova. She already opened a ghost account in a completely separate offshore bank. And here she set up a malicious automated script on her own laptop." The second Jason boarded his flight thinking they were escaping together, this script was programmed to clone the cryptocurrency wallet, lock Jason out, and drain his entire cut of the $20 million into her private account. He clicks on another file, pulling up a confirmed flight itinerary. "And look at her travel plans," the detective continues, shaking his head. "She was never going to their agreed drop point. She booked a one-way first-class ticket to Dubai under the fake passport, leaving tomorrow morning. She was going to leave Jason completely empty-handed, holding the useless physical drive, while she took all $20 million and vanished into a non-extradition country." The detective points to the screen, his face lit by the harsh glare of the monitors. I watch Amber weeping through the two-way glass, completely oblivious that her masterful escape plan is currently being projected in high definition for the Federal Cybercrime Division. Chief Reynolds shakes his head, disgusted by the sheer audacity of the 24-year-old assistant. "She is going to be indicted on federal wire fraud and international flight risk charges by midnight," Reynolds says, turning away from the glass. "Your technical assistance just saved us months of subpoenas and dead ends." I nod, picking up my structured leather tote bag from the metal table. "Happy to be of service, Chief." As I step out of the observation booth and into the sterile, brightly lit corridor of the precinct, my smartphone vibrates intensely in my pocket. I pull it out and glance at the screen. It displays an automated institutional caller ID. It is the local federal holding facility. I accept the call and press the phone to my ear. A recorded robotic voice announces an incoming call from an inmate at the Federal Holding Center. I press 1 to accept the charges, leaning against the cool cinder block wall of the hallway. Nicole Terrence Vanderbilt hisses through the receiver. His voice is low, strained, and vibrating with a desperate, cornered malice. "I know you are behind this. I know you set up the data logs to point the federal agents toward my firm." I continue walking down the corridor, my heels clicking rhythmically against the polished linoleum floor. "Hello, Terrence. I am surprised you used your one permitted phone call on me. I would have thought a man of your stature would be calling his own legal counsel right about now." "I do not need legal counsel." He spits back, his arrogance flaring up instantly, despite his current residency in a concrete cell. "I am legal counsel. And you made a catastrophic miscalculation tonight, Nicole. You think because you handed them Jason on a silver platter, you are walking away clean. You think you are untouchable." I push open the heavy double doors of the police precinct and step out into the cool, damp night air. I feel quite secure, actually. "You should not," Terrence snarls, his breathing heavy and erratic over the line. "Did you really think I would help Jason siphon corporate funds without building a failsafe for myself? I am a senior partner at a top-tier corporate defense firm. I do not take risks without collateral. Before the police raided the estate tonight, I triggered a dead man's switch on my private servers. I paused by my car, watching the streetlights reflect off the wet pavement." "Is that so?" "It is a fabricated digital paper trail," Terrence explains, his voice dripping with a vicious, triumphant superiority. "It is a complete, meticulously forged chain of emails, encrypted directives, and bank routing authorizations that heavily implicate you as the primary architect of the entire cyber fraud operation. It makes Jason look like your oblivious puppet." It makes me look like an unwitting legal consultant who was duped by your sophisticated hacking skills. If I do not enter a cancellation code by sunrise tomorrow, those documents will be automatically mass emailed to every federal prosecutor in the state, the board of directors at Horizon Tech, and the local media. He pauses, letting the threat hang heavy over the phone line. You are going to call off the dogs, Nicole. You are going to tell the cyber division that Jason acted alone, and you are going to testify that my firm had absolutely zero knowledge of the stolen funds. If you do not clear my name right now, I will drag you down into this federal indictment with me, and I will make sure you take the hardest fall. You forget who you are dealing with. I destroy people for a living, Nicole. I have bankrupted rival CEOs, I have ruined corporate whistleblowers, and I have dismantled entire companies just to protect my clients. I will not hesitate to crush a pathetic housewife playing vigilante. I listen to him panting on the other end of the line, his breath echoing off the hard cinder-block walls of his cell. I unlock my car door and slide into the driver's seat, closing the door to seal out the ambient noise of the city. The interior of the car is completely silent and dark. Are you finished, Terrence? I ask, my voice completely devoid of the panic he so desperately expects to hear. He hesitates, clearly thrown by my calm, unbothered demeanor. Did you hear what I just said? I am going to frame you for federal corporate espionage. I heard you perfectly, I reply, resting my head against the leather seat. But you seem to be operating under the delusion that I only started investigating you tonight. Terrence, you are a creature of habit. You launder money through the exact same shell corporations you use to hide your firm's retainer fees. You thought your Cayman Islands routing network was untraceable because you used multi-tiered proxy servers. The line goes dead silent. I can hear the sudden sharp intake of his breath. You are a brilliant lawyer, Terrence, but you are an archaic dinosaur when it comes to modern digital forensics. I continue, my tone conversational and light. I did not just crack Jason's honeypot server. I traced the entire financial lineage of your law firm. I found the hidden ledgers. I found the unredacted client lists. I found the exact off-the-books accounts you used to dodge your federal tax liabilities. What did you do? He whispers. The arrogant corporate shark persona instantly vaporizes, replaced by sheer unadulterated terror. I did exactly what a good citizen should do, I say. About 30 minutes ago, while you were being fingerprinted and stripped of your custom-tailored suit, I forwarded a comprehensive, fully decrypted dossier of your offshore banking details directly to the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service. I also sent a courtesy copy to the State Bar Association Ethics Committee. No, Terrence gasps, his voice breaking into a high-pitched wheeze. No, you could not have bypassed the biometric encryption on those servers. It is impossible. Nothing is impossible when your entire network security is managed by an arrogant man who uses his dog's name and his birth year as a master password, I reply coldly. Your fabricated documents claiming I am the mastermind will look incredibly convenient to a federal judge when they are released on the exact same day the IRS officially indicts you for $30 million in tax evasion and international money laundering. You are not going to destroy my life, Terrence. You are going to spend the rest of yours in a federal penitentiary, completely disbarred and utterly bankrupt. I listen as Terrence begins to hyperventilate. He is stammering, trying to form a sentence, trying to negotiate, but his mind is completely short-circuiting under the reality of his absolute destruction. Nicole, wait, please, we can make a deal. I can retract the dead man's switch right now. I can give you half of my offshore liquid assets. I can wire it to you tonight. Just tell them the files are corrupted. Please, you have to help me. I am not interested in your dirty money, Terrence. Enjoy your cell. Before I disconnect the call, I hear a heavy metal door slide open loudly on his end of the line. A sharp, authoritative voice echoes through the holding area, cutting through the background noise and drowning out Terrence's pathetic pleading. Terrence Vanderbilt. The voice barks, echoing off the concrete walls. Step away from the phone and place your hands flat against the bars. I am Special Agent Miller with the Internal Revenue Service. Based on newly acquired financial intelligence, we are formally adding 5 counts of international money laundering and felony tax evasion to your current charges. I hear a sharp, choked gasp from Terrence. Then there is the distinct heavy clatter of the plastic phone receiver dropping from his shaking hand and hitting the concrete floor. The line dangles, capturing the metallic sound of handcuffs clicking open before I calmly press end and start my engine. I pull out of the precinct parking lot and merge onto the quiet city streets. The damp night air rushes through the cracked window, carrying the sharp scent of rain and absolute victory. Terrence is finished. Jason is finished. Amber is sitting in an interrogation room, realizing her forged passport and stolen funds are completely gone. The federal and financial ruin of every single person who tried to destroy me is now absolute. I drive home and sleep soundly for the first time in 18 months. 3 days later, the dust has officially settled. The corporate receivership moved with terrifying speed. The bank seized my parents' estate, changing the locks and posting eviction notices on the wrought iron gates. Felicity and Richard are officially homeless. Their accounts are frozen, their credit cards are declined, and their luxury assets are being liquidated to cover Jason's massive restitution debt. They have been stripped down to nothing. I am standing in the pristine glass and steel atrium of Aegis Cyber Defense, the elite international cybersecurity firm where I have quietly built my professional empire over the last decade. The morning sun reflects off the polished marble floors. I am holding a coffee discussing a new encryption protocol with my lead developer when the heavy revolving doors at the front entrance are shoved violently off their track. Felicity marches into the lobby. The physical transformation is staggering. The designer dresses, the perfectly blown-out hair, and the smug country club arrogance are entirely gone. She is wearing stained gray sweatpants and an oversized wrinkled coat. Her face is pale and unwashed, her eyes wild and bloodshot with dark purple bags sagging beneath them. She looks exactly like what she is, a desperate, frantic woman who just spent her first night sleeping on the lumpy mattress of a cheap roadside motel. She scans the busy lobby and spots me standing near the reception desk. She lets out a guttural, animalistic shriek. "Nicole," she screams, charging across the polished marble floor and pointing a shaking, manicured finger at my face. "I want to speak to human resources right now." Her voice echoes off the high glass ceilings, drawing the immediate attention of every single employee, analyst, and executive in the lobby. Conversations halt. The quiet hum of the morning commute stops dead. 2 large security guards in dark suits step forward, but I raise a single hand, signaling them to hold their positions. "I want everyone to see this. I want her to dig her own grave." "You need to fire this woman immediately," Felicity yells, spinning around to address the bewildered receptionist and the gathering crowd of my colleagues. She is a criminal. She is a dangerous, manipulative sociopath. She hacked into federal servers and framed my husband. She stole my house. She stole my family's money. She is a monster and she belongs in a prison cell. I stand perfectly still, my arms crossed over my tailored suit. I do not raise my voice. I do not show a single ounce of embarrassment. "Are you quite finished, Felicity?" I ask, my voice echoing clearly in the silent lobby. Felicity is completely unhinged. She paces back and forth, waving her arms erratically. "You always did this," she shrieks, tears of pure toxic rage streaming down her face. "Even when we were kids, you could not stand that I was the favorite. You could not stand that I got the attention, the money, the respect. I was the golden child, and you were just a pathetic little nerd hiding behind a computer screen. But you always plotted in the background, trying to steal my spotlight. You orchestrated this entire thing just to punish me. I will not let you win. I will not let you take everything and walk away. I am going to burn your career to the ground just like you burned my life. I have proof of your illegal hacking, and I am going to watch them drag you out of this building in handcuffs." The private executive elevator chimes softly, cutting through her hysterical rant. The polished steel doors slide open and Evelyn Thorne steps out into the lobby. Evelyn is the founder and CEO of Aegis Cyber Defense. She is a ruthless pioneer in the cybersecurity industry, and more importantly, she is my oldest mentor. She hired me when I was 22. She knows every single dark, twisted detail about my family because she is the one who helped me set up the initial encrypted firewalls to protect my personal assets from them a decade ago. Evelyn walks across the lobby, her expensive heels clicking sharply against the marble. She radiates absolute terrifying authority. She stops directly in front of Felicity, looking my disheveled sister up and down with an expression of profound clinical disgust. Felicity, breathless and desperate, assumes Evelyn is the HR director. "Are you in charge here?" Felicity demands, stepping forward. "You need to terminate Nicole immediately. She is dangerous and she is committing corporate fraud." Evelyn lets out a dry, humorless laugh. "I know exactly who she is." Evelyn says, her voice commanding and crisp, cutting through Felicity's delusions like a scalpel. "And more importantly, I know exactly who you are, Felicity. I have known about your pathetic parasitic family for a decade. I know exactly how you treated my top engineer. I know about the corporate espionage your husband attempted, and I know that you are currently a homeless, bankrupt liability throwing a tantrum in my lobby because you finally lost your meal ticket." Felicity's jaw drops. The remaining color drains from her face. She takes a stumbling step backward, her hands dropping to her sides as the reality of her powerlessness crashes down on her. Evelyn snaps her fingers without looking away. The two security guards immediately flank my sister, grabbing her firmly by the arms. Evelyn pulls a thick manila envelope from her leather portfolio and shoves it hard against Felicity's chest. "That is a permanent restraining order," Evelyn states loudly, ensuring the entire lobby hears her clearly. "My legal team filed it the moment Jason was arrested. It bars you from coming within 500 feet of this building or my new global partner. You are trespassing on private property, and if you ever show your face here again, I will have you arrested for harassment." Felicity struggles against the heavy grip of the security guards, her eyes darting to me in absolute shock. "Global partner," she whispers, her voice breaking. "Yes," I say, stepping forward and looking her dead in the eye. "You made your bed, Felicity. Now go find a shelter to sleep in it." The security guards drag her backward toward the revolving doors. Felicity begins to scream again, kicking and thrashing wildly, but her shrieks are muffled by the thick glass as she is forcefully ejected onto the busy city sidewalk, leaving me standing in the lobby surrounded by the quiet, respectful applause of my peers. 1 month later, the polished marble floors of the corporate world have been replaced by the scuffed linoleum of the county family court. I sit at the plaintiff's table, perfectly composed. My posture is immaculate. I am wearing a charcoal-tailored suit, the armor of a newly appointed global partner. Beside me sits my divorce attorney, a ruthless shark who has never lost a case. We do not speak. There is no need. The strategy is already locked in place. The heavy wooden door beside the judge's bench clicks open and the room's atmosphere shifts immediately. Two armed bailiffs step into the courtroom, escorting Jason Blackwood. The sight of him almost makes me laugh out loud. The pristine vice president of Horizon Tech, the man who wore bespoke Italian silk and mocked my intelligence, is completely gone. He shuffles into the room wearing a bright orange county jail jumpsuit. His wrists are bound in heavy steel cuffs chained to a leather belly belt. His hair is greasy and overgrown, his face hollowed out from a month of eating state-mandated meals and sleeping on a concrete slab. He looks weak, pathetic, and entirely stripped of his unearned arrogance. He takes a seat at the defense table next to a public defender. He cannot afford private counsel anymore. The corporate receivership seized every single cent he had to satisfy the $5 million restitution bond. Terrence Vanderbilt, his former attack dog, is currently sitting in a federal penitentiary, awaiting trial for international money laundering. Jason is entirely alone. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes and a demeanor that tolerates absolutely zero nonsense, calls the court to order. She looks over the filings, adjusting her glasses. The dissolution of the marriage is straightforward, but the public defender stands up, clearing his throat nervously. He formally requests a motion for spousal support on Jason's behalf. Jason cannot contain himself. He pushes his chair back, the metal chains rattling loudly in the quiet courtroom. He ignores his lawyer's frantic gesture to sit down and addresses the judge directly. His voice echoes with a desperate whining entitlement. "You have to grant me alimony, Your Honor," Jason pleads, his voice cracking. "She hid her wealth from me. She is a global partner at an elite international cybersecurity firm making millions. I am accustomed to a certain lifestyle, a standard of living that we built together during our marriage. I have lost my job, my house, and my reputation. She has everything and I have nothing. It is her fault our marriage fell apart. I am entitled to financial support." He actually manages to force tears into his eyes, playing the role of the broken victim. He looks at me with an expression of manufactured betrayal. "She emotionally neglected me?" He cries out, his voice echoing off the high wood-paneled walls. "She was a machine, a cold, unfeeling robot who cared more about her computer screens and her firewalls than she cared about her own husband. I was living in a loveless, isolated marriage. I was starved for affection. Amber was just a mistake. She was a young girl who offered a lonely, neglected man the emotional comfort his wife brutally refused to give him. I was driven to infidelity because of her coldness." The entire courtroom is dead silent. The sheer audacity of his performance is staggering. He is standing in a prison jumpsuit facing federal cybercrime charges, and he is still trying to blame me for his decision to sleep with a 24-year-old assistant. I do not blink. I do not show a single ounce of emotion. I simply turn my head and give my attorney a single approving nod. My lawyer stands up, straightening his tie. He approaches the bench with absolute calm. "Your Honor," he begins, his voice projecting authority, "my client does not owe Mr. Blackwood a single dime. I submit Exhibit A into evidence." The bailiff takes a thick, stapled packet from my lawyer and hands it to the judge. It is the post-nuptial agreement. The judge reads the highlighted sections, her eyes narrowing. The document explicitly outlines that any financial liability, legal restitution, or marital dissolution resulting from infidelity or corporate fraud instantly invalidates any claim to spousal support. Jason signed away his right to my money the day he decided to forge his tax documents. But my lawyer is not finished. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we submit Exhibit B to address Mr. Blackwood's claim of emotional neglect and seeking innocent comfort." A court technician wheels a large high-definition monitor into the center of the room. My lawyer plugs in a secure encrypted flash drive. The screen flickers to life, displaying the crystal-clear hidden camera footage from my own master bedroom. The audio fills the courtroom, loud and undeniable. The video does not show a lonely man seeking affection. It shows Jason and Amber lying in my bed, actively, maliciously plotting my absolute destruction. It shows Jason laughing cruelly as he details exactly how he used my network credentials to hack the federal honeypot server. It shows Amber asking how much prison time I will get when the FBI raids the house. It shows Jason grinning, wrapping his arm around her, and saying he does not care as long as he walks away with the $20 million in stolen cryptocurrency. The judge watches the screen, her face turning to stone. She raises her remote and mutes the monitor, cutting off Jason's recorded laughter. She turns her gaze slowly toward the defense table. The look she gives Jason is one of pure, unadulterated revulsion. Jason is shrinking into his chair, his face completely drained of blood. His public defender has buried his face in his hands, realizing his client just perjured himself in open court. "Mr. Blackwood," the judge says, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet register. "In my 20 years on the bench, I have rarely seen a display of such profound parasitic entitlement. You stand before this court, facing federal felony charges, having orchestrated a plot to frame your spouse for a crime you committed. And you have the breathtaking audacity to demand she fund your lifestyle." She picks up her gavel, gripping it tightly. "The post-nuptial agreement is fully binding. Your request for alimony is denied. Your request for asset division is denied. You are solely responsible for your personal debts, including the $5 million corporate restitution owed to Horizon Tech." This marriage is officially dissolved. The gavel slams down with a sharp, explosive crack that seals his fate forever. Jason opens his mouth to protest, but before he can utter a single pathetic word, the heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom swing open. The rhythmic sound of hard-soled shoes echoes down the center aisle. A man in a sharp gray suit marches directly past the gallery viewing benches, stopping just behind the defense table. He reaches into his breast pocket and flips open a leather wallet displaying a gleaming gold federal badge to the bailiffs. Jason Blackwood. The man announces, his voice echoing through the silent room with absolute authority. I am Special Agent Miller with the Internal Revenue Service. We have secured the decrypted logs from your offshore ghost accounts. You are being transferred to federal custody to face additional charges of massive tax evasion and international money laundering. The entire courtroom plunges into a stunned, breathless silence. The heavy, polished oak doors swing shut behind Special Agent Miller with a soft thud that sounds like a vault sealing shut. He walks past the low wooden gate separating the gallery from the trial floor, his eyes locked entirely on the shivering man in the orange jumpsuit. The two armed bailiffs in the room immediately step back, yielding their jurisdiction to the federal authority now taking command of the space. Jason is hyperventilating. His chest heaves against the thin fabric of his jail uniform, the heavy steel belly chains clinking rhythmically against the wooden defense table with every erratic breath he takes. He looks wildly at his public defender, seeking some kind of legal shield, but the young lawyer has already taken two distinct steps away from him, carefully packing his legal pads into his briefcase. No defense attorney in the country is going to interfere with an active federal raid in the middle of a family court proceeding. You have the wrong information, Jason stammers, his voice a pathetic, reedy squeak. The Horizon Tech funds were seized. The $20 million was already recovered. I am already serving time for that. You cannot charge me twice. Agent Miller stops directly in front of the defense table. He reaches into his jacket and pulls out a thick, tightly bound stack of warrants, dropping them onto the polished wood with a heavy, definitive slap. This has absolutely nothing to do with the Horizon Tech incident last month, Mr. Blackwood, Agent Miller says, his voice projecting clearly across the silent courtroom. That was simply the catalyst that allowed us to subpoena your broader financial history. We are looking at a much deeper, much more systemic pattern of embezzlement. We have secured immutable blockchain ledgers proving you have been skimming corporate funds from your previous employers for over 4 years. Jason goes completely rigid. The remaining blood drains from his face, leaving him a sickening shade of gray. Agent Miller taps the top page of the warrants. You established a series of shell companies in the Cayman Islands and the Seychelles. You diverted micro-percentages of quarterly revenue from 3 separate tech firms, masking the transfers as vendor payments. You then converted those stolen funds into unregistered cryptocurrency to hide them from the IRS. The total amount exceeds $12 million. You are facing 20 years in federal prison for the money laundering alone. Jason shakes his head frantically, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. No, that is impossible. Those older accounts were completely anonymized. They were cold storage wallets. They were entirely disconnected from the primary network. Nobody could have found those. Nobody had the access keys. He stops abruptly. His wild, panicked gaze slowly drags across the courtroom until it locks onto me. I am sitting perfectly still at the plaintiff's table, my hands folded neatly in my lap, watching his total destruction with absolute icy calm. I watch the exact moment the realization clicks into place behind his eyes. His jaw goes slack. 3 years ago, Jason whispers, his voice trembling with a sudden, horrifying clarity. 3 years ago, right after I transferred the bulk of the assets into the secondary ledger, my crypto wallet crashed. I was locked out of the decentralized exchange for 48 hours. He strains against his chains, leaning forward over the table, his eyes wide and manic. You told me it was an algorithmic glitch. He gasps, pointing a shaking, cuffed finger at me. You told me the network was undergoing a hard fork and the assets were just temporarily displaced. I was terrified I had lost everything, and you sat next to me on the couch. You held my hand and helped me reset the two-factor authentication. I gave you my seed phrases because you said you needed them to bypass the corrupted firewall. I hold his gaze, my expression completely neutral. I did need them, Jason. You did not fix a glitch. He hisses, the terrifying reality of his situation finally crushing him. You caused the lockout. I nod slowly, allowing a razor-thin smile to touch my lips. You were getting careless. I explain, my voice echoing clearly for the judge and the federal agent to hear. You were routing stolen corporate funds through our shared home network. You were exposing me to your financial crimes. When I noticed the anomalous encrypted traffic hidden beneath your standard work files, I initiated a targeted denial of service attack on your personal server. I locked you out just long enough to panic you. And when you willingly handed me your master seed phrases to fix the problem, I did not just reset your access. I mirrored your entire hard drive. Jason lets out a choked, breathless sound, gripping the edges of the defense table. I secured every single stolen asset, every routed IP address, and every forged vendor invoice. I continue my tone, conversational and light. I packaged the entire ledger, encrypted it, and forwarded a blind copy to a secure offline server. I let you think you were a brilliant, untouchable mastermind. I let you keep your stolen money right where it was, knowing that the moment you ever tried to betray me, I would hand the IRS a perfectly wrapped, undeniable roadmap to your hidden wealth. Jason loses his mind. He lunges forward, his chair screeching violently backward against the hardwood floor. The heavy steel chains dig into his waist, stopping him short, but he thrashes against them like a rabid dog. You trapped me, he screams, spittle flying from his lips, as the two courtroom bailiffs immediately rush forward, grabbing his shoulders and wrestling him back. You set me up from the beginning. You let me think I was safe. You manipulated me. You are a sick, calculating monster. I stand up from my chair, smoothing the front of my tailored suit jacket. I look down at the thrashing, screaming man I once called my husband. I didn't make you steal Jason, I say, my voice cutting through his hysterical shouting with absolute chilling precision. I just made sure you couldn't hide it. The judge bangs her gavel furiously, demanding order as the bailiffs secure Jason by his arms and begin dragging him away from the table. Agent Miller steps forward, reciting the Miranda rights in a loud, practiced voice, cementing the finality of Jason's ruin. Suddenly, a piercing theatrical shriek erupts from the front row of the gallery. Patricia, Jason's overbearing, deeply entitled mother, has been sitting directly behind the defense table for the entire hearing. For the last 30 minutes, she had been glaring at me with smug superiority, waiting for the judge to award her son half of my house so she could continue living her lavish, subsidized lifestyle. Now watching federal agents drag her son away to face decades in prison, the reality of her own impending bankruptcy finally hits her. Realizing that the legal proceedings are moving forward and her son is about to be permanently locked away, Patricia plays her absolute last desperate card. My chest, she wails at the top of her lungs, her hands flying up to clutch her pearl necklace. Oh, my heart, you are killing me. She lets out another dramatic, warbling cry, swaying heavily on her feet before throwing herself sideways. She collapses onto the hardwood floor of the gallery aisle, her arms flailing wildly as she attempts to fake a massive heart attack, screaming for the judge to stop the arrest before she dies right there in the courtroom. The entire courtroom descends into absolute pandemonium. The judge furiously hammers her gavel, demanding order, but Patricia refuses to yield the floor. She thrashes on the polished hardwood aisle, clutching her throat with one hand and her chest with the other. She lets out these sharp, exaggerated gasps that sound like a dying Victorian heroine. Jason is actively trying to use the distraction. He looks toward the heavy wooden doors, perhaps calculating if he can outrun a federal agent while chained to a leather belly belt. Agent Miller simply places a heavy hand on Jason's shoulder, completely unfazed by the theatrical display behind them. Two armed bailiffs immediately radio for medical assistance. Within 90 seconds, the heavy courtroom doors swing open again, and a team of county paramedics rushes in with a gurney, a jump bag, and a portable defibrillator. They push past the gallery benches and kneel beside Patricia. She grabs the lead paramedic by the collar of his uniform. Her eyes are squeezed shut in mock agony. "You have to save me," she wails, her voice echoing off the high ceiling. "My heart is failing. The stress is literally killing me. She is doing this to me." She points a manicured, trembling finger directly at my face. "Nicole is a monster. She is putting me in an early grave just to punish my family," Patricia screams. She then glares at my attorney, her voice suddenly finding a remarkable amount of strength for a woman allegedly suffering a massive cardiac event. "I demand she pays for my medical care. I want a private suite at Sinai Hospital. Send the bills directly to her firm. She owes me for this trauma." I do not flinch. I slowly push my chair back, the wooden legs scraping softly against the floor, and I stand up. I smooth the lapels of my tailored charcoal suit and walk around the plaintiff's table. I stop just a few feet away from where Patricia is writhing on the floor. "Take your time, gentlemen," I say to the paramedics, my voice projecting crisp and clear through the silent courtroom. "There is absolutely no need to charge the defibrillator. She is not having a cardiac event. She is having a temper tantrum." The lead paramedic looks up at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Ma'am, we need to treat the patient." I cross my arms over my chest. I am intimately familiar with her medical history. I explain to the paramedic and the judge, who is watching the scene with narrowed, skeptical eyes. She has a very specific, highly documented physiological response to situations where she is no longer the center of attention or when she is losing control. 18 years ago at my high school graduation, she pulled this exact same stunt. I take a slow step closer, letting my voice carry the heavy weight of absolute certainty. I was the valedictorian. I was scheduled to give the closing address to a crowded gymnasium of 2,000 people. 5 minutes before my name was called, Patricia dropped to the gymnasium floor, clutching her chest and hyperventilating just like this. They had to stop the ceremony. They called an ambulance. We spent 6 grueling hours sitting in a sterile emergency room. I look over at Jason, who is sweating profusely under the grip of the IRS agent. "Do you want to know why she faked a heart attack on the most important academic day of my life?" I asked the courtroom. "Because my sister Felicity had a highly exclusive country club pool party she desperately wanted to attend. Sitting through my success was too boring for Felicity, and Patricia could not bear to see her favorite child mildly inconvenienced, so she staged a massive medical emergency to ensure we left early. The emergency room doctor eventually diagnosed her with mild dehydration and discharged her. It is a documented pattern of performative sabotage." Patricia gasps, trying to sound genuinely wounded. "You are a liar. I am dying." The lead paramedic, a hardened veteran who has clearly seen his fair share of fakers, lets out a tired sigh. He opens his jump bag and pulls out a portable EKG monitor. He efficiently snaps the sticky electrodes onto Patricia's wrists and chest, completely ignoring her dramatic protests. He powers on the machine. The digital screen flares to life. A bright green line bounces across the monitor. A steady, rhythmic, perfectly timed beep fills the silent courtroom. The paramedic stares at the screen for exactly 3 seconds before looking up at the judge. He shakes his head in utter exasperation. "Her vitals are picture perfect, Your Honor," he announces loudly, ensuring his voice carries to every corner of the room. "Blood pressure is 120/80. Her heart rate is an elevated but perfectly regular 85 beats per minute. Her oxygen saturation is resting at 99%. Ma'am, your heart is currently healthier than mine." The courtroom erupts into a chorus of muffled snickers and shocked murmurs. Patricia freezes on the floor. Her eyes snap open, realizing that modern medical technology has entirely betrayed her masterful performance. She frantically tries to pivot her strategy, sitting up and clutching her head instead of her chest. "It is an anxiety attack," she stammers, her voice dropping the dramatic rasp. The emotional abuse from this sociopath is causing severe psychological trauma. "I am having a panic attack." The judge leans forward over her bench. Her face is a mask of pure, unadulterated judicial fury. She grips her wooden gavel and slams it down onto the sounding block with a force that makes the entire room jump. "Get up off my floor right this instant!" the judge barks, pointing a commanding finger at Patricia. The paramedics immediately begin peeling the electrodes off her wrists, clearly disgusted by the waste of their time and municipal resources. Patricia scrambles to her feet, her face burning a bright, humiliated crimson. She tries to brush the dust off her expensive dress, refusing to look at the snickering gallery behind her. This court does not tolerate theatrical obstructions of justice, the judge thunders, her voice echoing with finality. You have deliberately disrupted federal proceedings, wasted the time of emergency medical personnel, and attempted to manipulate this court with a fraudulent medical hoax. I am holding you in direct summary contempt of court. Patricia's jaw drops. No, you cannot do that. I am a victim here. Bailiff, the judge commands, completely ignoring her protests. Take this woman into custody immediately. She is sentenced to 48 hours in the county jail. Perhaps a weekend sleeping on a cot will cure her anxiety. The two armed bailiffs step forward, grabbing Patricia firmly by the arms. She begins to shriek, kicking her designer heels against the floor as they drag her backward down the center aisle. She screams my name, cursing me, calling me a monster, but her voice is quickly muffled as the heavy wooden doors slam shut behind her. At the exact same time, Special Agent Miller hauls Jason to his feet. Jason is weeping openly now, his shoulders shaking as the IRS agent marches him out of the courtroom through the side holding door, completely disappearing into the federal justice system. The courtroom falls blissfully silent. The judge looks down at me, adjusting her glasses. She gives me a single respectful nod before declaring the court adjourned. I turn to my lawyer. He packs his files into his briefcase, snapping the locks shut with a satisfying click. He offers me a firm handshake. We walk out of the courtroom together, leaving the debris of my former life scattered on the hardwood floor. I push through the heavy mahogany doors and step out into the grand marble hallway of the courthouse. The air feels lighter. The suffocating weight I have carried for 18 months is entirely gone. I walk down the wide stone steps and push through the front entrance, stepping out into the bright, crisp afternoon sunlight. I take a deep breath of the fresh air, walking confidently toward the private parking lot reserved for attorneys and global partners. As I approach my designated parking space, I notice a sudden commotion. The red and blue lights of a police cruiser are flashing wildly, reflecting off the polished black paint of my luxury SUV. Two courthouse security guards have a man pinned aggressively face down across the hood of my car. I step closer, my heels clicking sharply against the asphalt. The man is struggling violently, his arms wrenched behind his back in heavy steel handcuffs. He is wearing a tailored coat that is covered in dirt grease and suspicious stains. A shattered spark plug lies on the ground next to my driver's side door, the window completely smashed in. I stop just a few feet away, staring at the side profile of the man pinned against my vehicle. It is Richard. He is clutching a pair of wire strippers in his trembling hand, having been caught red-handed trying to hotwire and steal my vehicle in a desperate, pathetic attempt to flee the state. He struggles violently against the cold metal hood of my custom SUV. The two courthouse security guards have his arms wrenched at painful angles, but he continues to thrash his expensive but unkempt shoes, scraping frantically against the asphalt. He is panting, spitting out curses completely devoid of the refined, authoritative facade he maintained for my entire childhood. His head snaps up when he hears the sharp, rhythmic click of my heels approaching. His eyes lock onto mine, wild and bloodshot. Tell them to let me go, he barks, his voice hoarse and desperate. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. This is family property. Tell them to back off right now. I stop a few feet away, folding my arms across my chest. I look at the shattered safety glass littering the pavement, the damaged steering column, and the wire strippers still dangling from his trembling fingers. He had actually tried to steal my vehicle in broad daylight outside a heavily guarded municipal building. The sheer panic driving him must have completely overridden his basic common sense. He is not a member of my family, I say to the primary security guard, my voice perfectly level. He is attempting to steal my vehicle. Please press full charges. Richard loses whatever remains of his mind. He lunges upward, slamming his chest against the hood of the car, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. You ungrateful wretch, he screams, the sound echoing across the crowded parking lot, drawing the attention of passing attorneys and court staff. They froze my accounts. The feds locked down everything I have because of Jason. I need to get out of the state before they issue the indictment. This car belongs to me just as much as it belongs to you. I am your father. Everything you have is because of me. He is hyperventilating now, his manic entitlement blinding him to the fact that 2 municipal police cruisers have just pulled into the parking lot, their sirens wailing loudly as they rush toward the scene. I gave you life, Richard roars, spitting the words at me as if they are a weapon. I brought you into this world. I put clothes on your back. You owe me everything. You owe me this car. You owe me your assets. Tell them to let me go and hand me those keys right now, or I swear to God I will destroy you. I stand perfectly still, letting his frantic, pathetic threats wash over me like water off a stone. I look at this man who spent my entire life minimizing my achievements, taking credit for my hard work, and demanding absolute obedience in exchange for conditional affection. He is no longer an intimidating patriarch. He is just a desperate criminal caught in the act. I step slightly closer, looking him dead in the eyes with pure ice. You gave me DNA, I say, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet register that commands absolute silence. I gave myself a life. Enjoy the grand theft auto charge. Joy the grand. I turn my back on him the exact moment the police officers step out of their cruisers. I hear the harsh metallic ratcheting of real police handcuffs replacing the grip of the security guards. I hear Richard screaming my name, threatening me, begging me, his voice pitching higher and higher as they forcefully shove him into the back of the squad car. I do not look back. I simply use my remote to lock my damaged SUV, turning away to call my private driver to take me back to my firm. The chapter of my life involving Richard is officially permanently closed. 8 months later, the sterile, unyielding atmosphere of the federal courthouse feels entirely different from the chaotic energy of the county family court. There are no dramatic outbursts here. There is no tolerance for theatrics. The room is heavily guarded by federal marshals, the air thick with the absolute gravity of the United States justice system. I am seated in the second row of the gallery, wearing a sharp navy blue suit, my posture impeccable. I am here not as a defendant, not as a victim, but as a primary witness for the prosecution. Seated at the long wooden defense tables ahead of me are the core conspirators. The physical toll of the last 8 months in federal holding is staggering. Jason Blackwood is a hollow shell of a human being. The arrogant tech executive who once wore Italian silk and sneered at my intellect is entirely gone. His prison jumpsuit hangs loosely on his emaciated frame. His hair is thinning, his posture completely defeated. He sits staring blankly at the polished wood of the table, his hands shackled to a waist chain, trembling incessantly. To his right sits Amber, the 24-year-old former assistant who thought she was going to sail off into the sunset with $20 million in stolen cryptocurrency, looks utterly terrified. She is weeping silently, her face blotchy and pale. The reality that her youth and manufactured innocence will not protect her from federal mandatory minimums has finally crushed her spirit. She keeps looking back at the gallery, searching for family members who have completely abandoned her since the media exposed her malicious role in the embezzlement and framing plot. On the far left is Terrence Vanderbilt. The once formidable attack dog lawyer has lost his law license, his reputation, and his freedom. He is seated next to a court-appointed attorney, looking aged and broken, the arrogant smirk permanently erased from his face by the weight of international money laundering charges. The heavy door beside the bench swings open. The bailiff calls the courtroom to rise. All rise. The United States District Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Arthur Caldwell presiding. Judge Caldwell, a man known throughout the district for his merciless sentencing in severe white-collar crime, takes his seat at the high mahogany bench. He adjusts his reading glasses and looks down at the 3 defendants with an expression of profound, unyielding disdain. The silence in the room is absolute, broken only by the quiet, pathetic sound of Amber's stifled sobbing. He opens the thick, heavily documented sentencing dossier. The sound of the rustling paper echoes clearly in the cavernous wood-paneled room. We are here today for the final sentencing in the matter of the United States versus Jason Blackwood, Amber Evans, and Terrence Vanderbilt. The judge begins his voice resonating with heavy, inescapable authority. The defendants have pled guilty to a sweeping conspiracy that includes wire fraud, international money laundering, perjury, and a coordinated, malicious attempt to frame an innocent party for their own extensive financial crimes. Jason closes his eyes, a single tear slipping down his hollow cheek. Amber buries her face in her shackled hands, her shoulders shaking violently. Terrence stares straight ahead, his jaw locked in grim resignation. They are entirely out of options, out of money, and out of time. Judge Caldwell folds his hands over the massive file that contains the complete, irrefutable documentation of their ruin. He looks down from the high mahogany bench, his expression a mask of absolute, unforgiving judicial authority. The packed gallery holds its collective breath. You can hear the faint hum of the courtroom ventilation system in the heavy silence. Judge Caldwell addresses Amber Evans first. The courtroom listens with rapt attention as the judge recounts the plea agreement she secured just 48 hours before the trial formally commenced. Amber did not just cooperate with the federal authorities. She enthusiastically handed the prosecution the keys to Jason's entire illicit kingdom. During her sworn allocution, she dropped the helpless, naive victim act entirely and methodically detailed every single one of Jason's illegal transfers. She provided the federal prosecutors with Jason's burner phones, his hidden ledger passwords, and the audio recordings she had secretly made of him, bragging about his plans to frame me. She traded his life for a reduced sentence without a second thought. Jason turns his head slowly to look at the 24-year-old woman, for whom he threw away our marriage. His face is a portrait of pure, unadulterated shock and betrayal. Amber refuses to meet his gaze. She stares rigidly at the judge, clutching a crumpled tissue, completely ignoring the man she helped destroy. For your extensive cooperation with federal authorities and your willingness to provide crucial evidence, Judge Caldwell says, his voice devoid of any actual sympathy. This court sentences you, Amber Evans, to 5 years in a minimum security federal correctional institution, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Amber lets out a loud, shuddering breath and slumps forward against the wooden table. 5 years in federal prison is not a victory, but compared to what is coming next, it is a miracle. The judge shifts his terrifying focus entirely to Jason. Mr. Blackwood. Judge Caldwell begins, his tone dropping to a glacial chill that seems to lower the temperature of the entire room. In my decades on the bench, I have presided over complex financial crimes and elaborate frauds. But the sheer malice and arrogance of your actions stand apart. You did not merely steal from your employers. You weaponized the justice system in a calculated, deeply vindictive attempt to send your innocent wife to prison. You embezzled millions, laundered it across international borders, evaded federal taxes, and committed corporate espionage with breathtaking entitlement. Jason tries to stand, opening his mouth to beg, but his legs completely buckle beneath him. The 2 armed bailiffs grip his arms, forcing him to remain upright to hear his fate. For the charges of grand larceny, corporate espionage, and federal tax evasion, Judge Caldwell announces, his voice booming across the silent room. I sentence you to 20 years in a federal penitentiary. You will serve this sentence without the possibility of early parole. Furthermore, you are ordered to pay full financial restitution, which ensures that upon your eventual release, you will spend the rest of your natural life in absolute poverty. Jason lets out a guttural, agonizing wail. It is the raw sound of a man watching his entire existence evaporate into ash. The bailiffs do not give him a single moment to process the devastation. They immediately yank him backward, hauling him away from the defense table and dragging him toward the holding doors as he continues to sob uncontrollably. Judge Caldwell does not even blink. He turns his attention to the final man at the defense table. Terrence Vanderbilt stands up. The expensive, bespoke, tailored suits are permanently gone, replaced by the same humiliating orange jumpsuit Jason wears. Terrence tries to maintain his aggressive, aristocratic posture, but his hands are shaking so violently that the steel chains around his waist rattle loudly against the wood. As an officer of the court, you were sworn to uphold the law, the judge states, staring down at Terrence with absolute revulsion. Instead, you utilized your legal expertise to facilitate international money laundering, actively conspired to commit perjury, and attempted to defraud a victim in open court. The State Bar Association has already formally disbarred you. You will never practice law again. I sentence you to 10 years in federal prison. Terrence closes his eyes, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle twitches violently in his cheek. He does not say a word as the federal marshals secure his arms and march him out the side door, following Jason into oblivion. The satisfying heavy thud of the gavel echoes through the courtroom, finalizing the absolute destruction of the people who tried to ruin me. I sit perfectly still at the plaintiff table, taking a slow, deep breath. I feel a profound, sweeping sense of peace wash over my entire body. I slowly turn my head away from the empty defense table and scan the crowded gallery behind me. My gaze moves past the eager reporters and the curious onlookers until it lands on the third row. My parents and my younger sister Felicity are sitting together, huddled miserably in the corner of the wooden bench. The sight of them is jarring. For my entire life, my family obsessed over appearances. They worshipped wealth status and the illusion of superiority. They always demanded I conform to their rigid, shallow expectations, and they constantly elevated Felicity as the golden child because she parroted their vanity and married into a prestigious name. Now they look entirely unrecognizable. My mother's perfectly coiffed hair is flat and showing stark gray at the roots. My father is wearing a wrinkled, outdated suit that hangs loosely on his frame, his posture completely collapsed. Felicity looks haggard, her expensive designer makeup absent, her eyes red-rimmed and sunken with exhaustion. They lost absolutely everything. When Jason and Terrence were riding high, my parents and Felicity eagerly invested the entirety of their life savings and their home equity into Terrence's fraudulent offshore funds. They entirely ignored my warnings. They believed the men who mocked me. They chose the criminals because the criminals promised them elite status and guaranteed impossible returns. When the federal agents seized Jason and Terrence's assets, the government seized my family's money right along with it. Their sprawling, immaculate suburban mansion was foreclosed on by the bank last month. The luxury cars were repossessed. The country club memberships were publicly revoked. They are currently living out of a cheap, run-down, weekly rate motel just off the interstate highway, stripped of every single thing they once used to make me feel small. Felicity slowly raises her head. Her bloodshot eyes meet mine across the silent courtroom. She looks terrified, broken, and desperate. She knows I am now holding the keys to my own highly successful cybersecurity firm. She knows I'm holding millions in secure assets. She knows I am living the exact life they all told me I was too ungrateful and too stubborn to ever achieve. Felicity presses her trembling hands together. Her eyes fill with pleading, pathetic tears as she looks at me, desperately mouthing the words sorry. She wants a lifeline. She wants me to swoop in, open my wallet, and rescue the family that never once protected me. I do not smile. I do not frown. I do not show a single ounce of emotion. I simply look right through her, letting my gaze slide past her face, as if she is nothing more than empty space. I turn back to the front of the courtroom, stand up, and walk confidently out the heavy oak doors, leaving them trapped in the exact prison they built for themselves. I drive out to the affluent neighborhood 2 weeks later. The sprawling, perfectly manicured lawns and towering oak trees look exactly the same as they did when I was a child. The air still smells like expensive fertilizer and entitlement. I pull my rented, unobtrusive sedan up to the curb and put the car in park, letting the engine idle quietly as I look at the massive colonnaded mansion that used to be my parents' home. This was the house where Patricia staged her dramatic fainting spells whenever Felicity was not the absolute center of attention. This was the house where my father sat in his dark wood study, meticulously calculating how to use my academic achievements to boost his own social standing, while refusing to pay a single dime toward my college tuition. This was the house where they hosted lavish catered dinners for Terrence Vanderbilt and Jason, laughing at my career choices, while I sat quietly at the end of the table, absorbing every insult, every slight, every dismissal. I spent 18 years within those walls feeling profoundly inadequate, constantly put down by the very people who were supposed to protect and nurture me. Now the grand double doors are padlocked. A bright orange foreclosure notice is stapled directly to the custom mahogany wood. The pristine lawn is already beginning to overgrow the expensive landscaping, turning feral without its subsidized maintenance crew. A heavy, rumbling sound breaks the quiet suburban morning. I roll down my window as a massive yellow Caterpillar excavator turns onto the street, its diesel engine roaring. It is followed by a flatbed truck carrying a heavy-duty wrecking ball crane and a small fleet of industrial dump trucks. The convoy stops directly in front of the mansion. A foreman in a hard hat steps out holding a clipboard. He walks over to my car, leaning down to my window. "We are ready when you are," Ms. Vance, the foreman, says, checking his manifest. I nod, handing him the signed demolition permits. My parents have absolutely no idea what happened to this property after the bank seized it. They assume it was sold at auction to another wealthy family who would maintain the legacy they so desperately cared about. They do not know that my LLC purchased the foreclosed deed from the bank for literally pennies on the dollar during a closed-door commercial liquidation sale. I step out of the car, crossing my arms over my chest as the foreman signals his crew. The heavy machinery rolls onto the pristine lawn, the massive treads tearing up the expensive sod. The excavator raises its heavy steel arm, positioning the hydraulic claw directly over the grand colonnaded entryway. The first strike sounds like thunder. The heavy steel smashes through the roof, shattering the custom-imported Italian tiles. The second strike tears through the master bedroom, ripping the expensive silk wallpaper and crushing the mahogany floors where my parents used to plot their social climbing strategies. I stand perfectly still, watching the dust and debris billow up into the blue sky. I do not feel a single ounce of sadness. I do not feel nostalgic. I feel an absolute profound sense of liberation watching the physical monument to my childhood misery get systematically reduced to rubble. "We are clearing the entire lot today," the foreman shouts over the roaring engines, walking back over to me. "The surveyors are coming in tomorrow to map out the foundation for the new commercial build." "It is going to be perfect," I tell him, watching the dining room where I was told I was a failure collapse into a pile of splintered wood. "The new building will not be a mansion. I have already secured the municipal zoning variances. The lot is going to hold a state-of-the-art high-security commercial facility. It will be the headquarters for a new nonprofit cybersecurity training center, fully funded by my firm, dedicated exclusively to teaching underprivileged women how to code secure networks and build their own independent wealth. I am taking the exact soil where my parents tried to break my spirit and turning it into a foundation to ensure hundreds of other women never have to depend on toxic, entitled people for their survival. I watch the demolition for another 20 minutes until the primary structure is completely leveled. The air is thick with drywall dust. I get back into my car, roll up the window, and drive away without looking in the rearview mirror. An hour later, the elevator doors chime open on the 42nd floor of the glass high-rise downtown. I step out onto the plush carpet of my firm's executive suite. The receptionists smile and greet me by name. I walk past the bustling bullpen of junior analysts and open the heavy glass door to my new corner office. The view is staggering. The entire city skyline stretches out before me, the harbor glittering brightly in the midday sun. My custom mahogany desk sits perfectly organized in the center of the room. I walk over to the private espresso machine nestled in the corner and pour myself a cup of premium dark roast coffee. I set my phone face up on my desk. The screen is completely blissfully blank. There are no frantic entitled text messages from Felicity demanding money. There are no manipulative voicemails from my mother trying to guilt-trip me into paying her motel bills. There are no arrogant emails from Jason or Terrence. The toxic noise that defined my entire life has been entirely permanently muted. I sit down in my high-backed leather executive chair. I pull up my encrypted personal financial dashboard on my secondary monitor. The numbers staring back at me are staggering. The assets I secured, the corporate buyout bonuses, and the restructured global partnership shares have pushed my accounts into the eight-figure range. I have more money, more security, and more absolute power than my family or my ex-husband ever dreamed of possessing. I turn to my primary monitor, pulling up the master security protocol for the firm's new global firewall. I take a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the rich, bitter taste. I place my hands on the keyboard and type out the final complex sequence of code, locking down my network, securing my assets, and cementing my empire. I press enter. The screen flashes green, confirming the system is absolute and impenetrable. I sit back in my chair, looking out over the city I now own, finally entirely free. The most profound lesson from this ordeal is that true power lies in absolute independence. For years, I allowed a toxic family and a manipulative husband to dictate my worth, mistaking their conditional tolerance for love. But you cannot negotiate with people committed to misunderstanding you. Realizing this finally freed me. I learned that setting ironclad boundaries and maintaining financial autonomy are not acts of betrayal. They are acts of survival. When people show you their true colors, do not panic, just prepare. The greatest revenge is never about destruction. It is strictly about building an impenetrable life for yourself.